Chapter 3196. Yishuin's attack turned the Stone Clan's ancestral land into nothingness. Even the remaining emperor of the Stone Clan was completely annihilated by this sword. This sword slashed into the ground, creating a huge crack that was tens of thousands of miles long. The entire Stone Province trembled. Everyone felt the power of this attack. Many powerful beasts were shocked by the aura released by this sword. They had no choice but to kneel on the ground and shiver. They didn't dare to move at all. The people dispatched by various forces in the Stone Province quickly arrived at the periphery of the Stone Clan's ancestral land. They were shocked to see this world-destroying scene. The Stone Clan had ruled the Stone Province for many years. They naturally had supreme prestige in the Stone Province. Under the rule of the Stone Clan, no other race dared to resist. Now, the Stone Clan had been uprooted, and their ancestral land had been completely destroyed. Without the support of countless experts in the ancestral land, the remaining experts of the Stone Clan scattered across the Stone Province were nothing. They were all ordinary clansmen of the Stone Clan. Even if some of the experts managed to escape, it was useless. They couldn't cause any big waves. In this world, the number of experts was not enough to be strong. The real foundation of a clan depended on how many top experts it had. Only those top experts were the fundamental reason for everything. The role of a top expert had been reflected incisively and vividly in this battle. Yishuin had slaughtered the experts of the other three clans by himself. He had reversed the disadvantageous situation of the human race by himself. This was the role of a top expert. Very soon, the tribes that were originally under the command of the Stone Clan began to grow restless. They began to slaughter the Stone Clan, seize their territory, and even wage war against each other. It was all for the sake of seizing the fertile territory that originally belonged to the Stone Clan. However, they didn't know that the human clan's expedition army would arrive soon. No matter how much they swallowed, they would have to spit it out later. At this time, their actions were completely meaningless. However, they couldn't understand. In other words, they didn't think that the fall of the Stone Clan's ancestral land had anything to do with the human clan. They only thought that the Stone Clan had provoked someone they shouldn't have. This was the effect of Yishuin's surprise attack. They didn't know who had attacked them. Yishuin had already left the Stone Province and arrived in the Dark Province, while the various clans of the Stone Province were scrambling for territories. Unlike the Stone Province, the Dark Province was almost completely dark, and there was very little light. The laws of darkness ran rampant for a while, and it was as if the entire Dark Province was enveloped by a huge formation. It was this formation that had transformed the entire Dark Province into its current state. With the law of darkness operating, the living beings that lived in it for a long time would also transform into a dark physique. This was a long-term plan. Because of this formation, it would not be so easy for the other races to survive in the Dark Province. There was still a long way to go before the rise of the human race. In a place like the Dark Province, even if the array formation was broken, it would still be difficult to completely dispel the darkness. It would take several generations of effort to do so. However, there was nothing that could be done about it. The rise of any race was accompanied by countless massacres. It had to be done step by step, and there was no shortcuts. Whoosh! The Avicii sword in Yishuin's hand slashed out. In an instant, the darkness between the heavens and the earth was dispelled, and the laws of darkness were completely broken in an instant. The first ray of sunlight was like the light of creation, shining into the Dark Province. Many of the dark creatures in the Dark Province screamed and turned into ashes. Only the dark race with magical powers and cultivation could not be completely destroyed by the sunlight. These creatures born in the darkness were most afraid of some extreme yang things. It was simply the nemesis of their lives. Who dares to cause trouble in my Dark Province? Shouts could be heard from all over the Dark Province. The Dark Province was different from the Stone Province. There was no ancestral land of the Stone race because the entire Dark Province was ruled by the Dark race. The only difference was that some of the Dark race were not part of the ruling class of the Dark Province, and they were constantly resisting. Yishuin's goal was to destroy the huge formation in the entire Dark Province. Even a powerful barrier and formation would be broken in an instant when the sword slashed down. Rumble. The entire land of the Dark Province trembled. Everyone felt a shocking sword light falling down. Yishuin walked all the way in. Around him, countless thunder power was sweeping wildly, turning into a terrible thunderstorm that fell down. The entire land of the Dark Province was completely covered in it. Countless dark races people had suffered heavy losses. Yishuin walked while calculating the location of the core of the Dark Province's spell formation. This was the core of the entire Dark Province. It was unknown how many people had reinforced this spell formation, so it wouldn't be easy for Yishuin to break it in a hurry. The only way was to find the core of the spell formation and destroy it. This would be the fastest way to break the spell formation. As Yishuin walked, he attracted countless thunderbolts to break the law of darkness. Soon, many dark race experts tried to stop him. However, these dark race experts were only at the peak of the quasi-emperor realm. So, they couldn't fight back against Yishuin. They couldn't even get close to Yishuin's thunderstorm. So, they were completely destroyed. Yishuin did not care about them at all. With his amazing calculation ability, he quickly figured out the location of the formation core and flew directly towards it. Who is it? The true eye of the entire formation was located in an endless mountain range. The entire mountain range was shrouded in the most extreme darkness. The power of darkness all over the Dark Province came from this mountain range. An ancient existence was awakened by Yishuin as he flew above the mountain range. That terrifying aura carried an undisguised intention of destruction and completely awakened him from his deep slumber. Quick! Yishuin ignored it and directly pinched a seal. Then, all the thunder and lightning in the world condensed here and turned into a thunder dragon that fiercely blasted into the mountain range. Boom! The entire mountain range seemed to have encountered a supreme and mighty force, and it exploded on the spot. The originally endless dark force also stopped in an instant and no longer spewed out. Yishuin knew that his speculation was correct. However, at this moment, a figure suddenly jumped out and directly blasted in his direction. This was an unimaginably tyrannical wave that surpassed the extreme speed of this world. It suddenly blasted in front of Yishuin. Oomph! Yishuin snorted coldly and raised his hand to block the wave. Then, he saw a figure appear in the void. It was an old man of the dark race wearing a black robe. His eyes were full of vicissitudes. There was a big hole in his chest, but his body was tyrannical to the extreme. Seventh realm? No, I'm afraid it's an existence of the eighth realm. Yishuin narrowed his eyes. He did not expect such a powerful expert to be hidden in the dark race. He had fought with the Spirit Emperor before, so he was not unfamiliar with the Emperor of the eighth realm. He could quickly determine that this person should be an existence of the eighth realm. If you have such strength, could it be that you are the Dark Emperor? Yishuin quickly guessed the identity of this person. In the history of the Dark Race, their founder was not the Dark Shadow Emperor, but someone else. That person was the Dark Emperor. The Dark Emperor was invincible a long time ago. He claimed to be a heavenly lord, but then he disappeared. Many people thought that he had died. They did not expect to see the Dark Emperor here. So you are an expert of the eighth realm. No wonder you can set up such a large formation. You are indeed powerful, Yishuin said. Although the opponent was an expert of the eighth realm, Yishuin did not panic. At the same time, he also saw that there was a big hole in the Dark Emperor's chest. Perhaps the Dark Emperor had not been able to appear all these years. Instead, he had been hiding in the eye of the formation, where the power of darkness was the strongest to heal himself. Generally speaking, this kind of healing method was only possible when there was an injury that was difficult to recover from. Even the recovery ability of an emperor could not recover. One could only imagine how serious the injury was. A seriously injured person like this was not enough to make him so afraid. Although the Dark Emperor's aura was strong, it was still inferior to Jiuling Huang. He was not afraid of Jiuling Huang and dared to fight him, let alone the Dark Emperor. Human, you have intruded into a place you should not have. If you retreat now, you can still keep your life. The Dark Emperor said slowly. His eyes shone with a deep light, as if all the darkness in the world had gathered. Dark Emperor, don't try to be brave. Do you think I can't see that you're seriously injured and not at your peak? Otherwise, would you let me go? Yi Shiwen mercilessly exposed the Dark Emperor. Who are you? Dark Lord saw that the other party didn't fall for his trick and didn't buy it. So he asked, I am the newly appointed 4 Prefectures Patrol Envoy of the Fortune God Dynasty. The Dark Race dares to disobey the decree of the Fortune God Dynasty. Today they are doomed. Yi Shiwen said lightly, Ah, what a decree of the Fortune God Dynasty. If I was still at my peak, the Fortune God Dynasty would not dare to provoke me. What a pity. The Dark Emperor's expression was a little sad. After all, he was not at his peak, and he was seriously injured. Compared to the past, there was no comparison. Otherwise, if someone like him dared to intrude, it would be a dead end. But do you think you have a chance to break through the eye of the formation? When the other emperors of the Dark Race arrive, it will be your death. Chapter 3197. The Dark Emperor said calmly. His eyes were fixed on Yi Shiwen as if he wanted to scare him away. Yi Shiwen was expressionless. How could he not see that the Dark Emperor was trying to use words to force him to retreat? With the Dark Emperor's condition, he would not be willing to fight unless he had no other choice. Whether or not he could defeat Yi Shiwen in this fight, his own injuries would be enough to kill him. If it were anyone else, they would have been scared away. The Dark Lord alone was not much, but if the other emperors gathered, unless they were in the 8th realm, they would be dead meat. Are you still waiting for the Dark Shadow Emperor and the others? Then let me tell you, you don't have to wait at all, because they are all dead. Yi Shiwen said coldly. What? The Dark Lord's expression finally changed. He could no longer maintain his composure because he had heard some terrible news. All of his trump cards were built on the assumption that the Dark Shadow Emperor and the others could return quickly. But on the other hand, if the Dark Shadow Emperor could not return in time, then the situation would undoubtedly be extremely bad. They all died on the Holy Light Mountain. I killed them personally, so don't think about getting lucky. Yi Shiwen said calmly. The Dark Lord's expression became even colder. His eyes flashed with murderous intent. You want to provoke me? You want me to fight you with all my strength? That's right. Yi Shiwen didn't deny it. He could have kept it a secret from the Dark Emperor. He could have killed the Dark Emperor in a battle, but he had told the Dark Emperor about it. The Dark Emperor had been forced into a desperate situation. If I'm not wrong, you have already entered the peak of the 7th realm. Are you trying to use me to enter the 8th realm? The Dark Lord asked. Although he was asking Yi Shiwen, his expression was very certain. He clearly understood Yi Shiwen's plan. Yes, within the 7th realm. No one is my opponent, and you are the best whetstone. Yi Shiwen was extremely cold. He had now entered the peak of the 7th realm, and he understood how difficult the 8th realm was. Although he had already made many preparations, he did not mind making more preparations. It was rare for a level 7 cultivator to fight against a level 8 cultivator. Furthermore, the Dark Lord was severely injured. This was the best opportunity to sharpen his skills. Arrogant, Dark Emperor's eyes were full of murderous intent. Yi Shiwen had thoroughly angered him. Not only had he killed the essence of the Dark Race, but he had also used him as a whetstone. He had never been humiliated like this since he became an emperor. If I remember correctly, many years ago, the Dark State had also invaded the human state. Unfortunately, the Sui Sovereign appeared out of nowhere and stopped the Dark State's invasion. If I'm not wrong, the wounds on your body were inflicted by the Sui Sovereign at that time. A lot of information flashed in Yi Shiwen's mind. He suddenly remembered that the Dark Race had invaded the human province many years ago. However, they failed and were eventually driven away by the human sovereign. The Dark Lord never appeared again after that, and the Lord of the Dark Continent was replaced by the Dark Shadow Emperor. If that was the case, then the person who had caused the Dark Lord to be severely injured in the end was also very obvious. That's right, Dark Tharch said, but you will regret your arrogance today. Do you think you are invincible just because you have some cultivation? The Dark Lord looked at Yi Shiwen coldly and attacked. The blood in his body burned to the extreme, and he instantly turned into a black shadow that pounced towards Yishiwen. He was right in front of Yishiwen in an instant, not giving Yishiwen a chance to breathe. His attack was even faster than the speed of light, affecting the timeline. His cultivation was indeed amazing, second only to the Spirit Emperor that Yishiwen had seen before, although Yishiwen had only seen 2 8th Realm Emperors so far. However, these two people's cultivation methods could be said to have their own merits, and each had their own tyrannical aspects. So fast, Yishiwen couldn't help but be surprised. Even the Dark Shadow Emperor, Stone Emperor, and the others could not escape his eyes. But when the Dark Lord attacked, he could only vaguely see a few afterimages. However, Yishiwen instantly opened his dual pupils and caught sight of the Dark Emperor's silhouette. The demon wings on his back suddenly unfurled, and then he completely protected himself within. Dang! But there was only a loud roar. The Dark Lord's amazing attack was completely blocked by the demon wings. But even so, Yishiwen still took a few steps back before he could completely dissipate the huge force. On the other side, the Dark Lord was shocked to see that he could not kill Yishiwen. With his 8th realm strength, even if he was severely injured, he should not have only been able to force him back. But Yishiwen did it. He finally understood why Yishiwen said that there was no opponent in the 7th realm. With this kind of strength, he dared to challenge the 8th realm. How could there be a 7th realm opponent? Use your full strength. You can't pose any threat to me at this level, Yishiwen said calmly as he looked at the Dark Lord in front of him. You destroyed the high-level elites of the Dark Race. I will make you pay with your life. The Dark Lord roared like a wounded beast. The elites of the Dark Race had all been wiped out. Without the protection of these God Kings and Quasi-Emperors, how could the Dark Race obtain such a large piece of land? There was so much wealth in a prefecture that it was impossible to count. Who knew how many people were lurking in the shadows? Under such circumstances, the Dark Race no longer had the capital to dominate. In future battles, it would be very difficult for them to avoid being wiped out. Boom! A terrifying aura was released from the Dark Lord's body. Endless nomological laws condensed into divine chains that danced in the sky, forming a terrifying storm. Under the influence of this storm, time and space were all affected. Everything was in a mess, and no one could truly capture his situation. This was the true power of an 8th realm expert. He was an invincible expert who was only one step away from the 9th realm. Most of his strength was used to suppress the injuries on his body. But now he released all his strength. 10 moves, I will kill you in 10 moves. The Dark Lord roared. You don't have to talk big. Kill me in 10 moves? I think you can only last 10 moves. Yishiwen smiled faintly. He had seen through the Dark Lord's plan, but his heart was already on high alert. The Dark Lord only had 10 moves. After that, he would die even if he did not want to. His injuries would relapse, and it would be enough to kill him. These were all left behind by the Sway Sovereign. It was precisely because of this that the Dark Lord would use all his strength to kill Yishiwen within these 10 moves. Boom! The Dark Emperor attacked again. As soon as he attacked, a dark secret art was activated above his head. The wounds on his body were hidden. He was using all the power in his body and all the life force in his body to be unleashed at this moment. Didn't you want to enter the 8th realm? Now, I will show you the power of the 8th realm. You are still far from it. As the Dark Lord snorted, a terrifying dark power surged and blasted towards Yishiwen. There were no fancy divine abilities or martial arts. At his level of cultivation, it could be said that he had reached great heights. There was no need for divine abilities or martial arts. He had the qualifications to do so. Since ancient times, he had always been in existence at the peak of the law of darkness. Yishiwen remained motionless. He could only feel the terror of this dark tide. The time robe emerged on his body and protected him. The time kingdom of God spread out. The demon wings on his back began to flap unceasingly, protecting him and setting up a second layer of defense. Boom! The power of darkness source blasted directly into the time divine kingdom and instantly smashed the darkness divine kingdom into pieces. Then it rushed directly towards Yi Shiwen, who was inside. Boom! Then it broke through the defense of the devil wings with irresistible force and directly rushed towards Yi Shiwen's face. This was the power that only the masters of the Eighth Realm could possess. The masters of the Seventh Realm were too weak in front of Yi Shiwen. It was just a matter of how long they could hold on, and it was impossible for them to cause any problems to him. Dominate the world. The Avicii sword in Yi Shiwen's hand emitted a clanging sound. He let out a loud shout and chopped down. It seemed as if he was the sole ruler of the world. It smashed everything in its path and collided with the dark force. Boom! The dark power was directly split apart by the Avicii sword. After passing through layers of obstruction, the dark power was no longer as terrifying as it was at the beginning. It was cut down by the Avicii sword. Whoosh! In a flash, a figure appeared in front of Yi Shiwen instantly. Without giving him any chance to react, a foot that seemed to tear apart the light and darkness kicked towards Yi Shiwen. Boom! This foot blasted on the time robe with the power to destroy the world. Buzz! The entire time robe was trembling. The power of time was frantically operating, trying to dissipate this huge force. Good! Yi Shiwen did not get angry. Instead, he smiled and took a step back. After dissipating the huge force, not only did he not avoid the sharp edge, but on the contrary, the martial Emperor's seal appeared in his hand, and he directly rushed forward. If he retreated, then this plan would be in vain. This battle was also crucial for him. It was related to when he would step into the Eighth Realm. There was no room for retreat. Chapter 3198. This was not Yi Shiwen's first time fighting an Eighth Realm master, but he was more confident this time. He was much stronger than before, and the Dark Emperor was weaker than Spirit Emperor. Most importantly, the Dark Emperor was severely injured. He would only last 10 moves at most. Just 10 moves? Yi Shiwen did not need to think about the long term. He could fight with all his might. If he could survive these 10 moves, he would win. The Dark Emperor's combat power was terrifying, but it was also because of this that he became a whetstone. In the blink of an eye, Yi Shiwen was already in front of the Dark Emperor. Facing Yi Shiwen's sudden attack, the Dark Emperor's eyes widened in anger. His whole body emitted a dark power. In the entire universe, all time, all space was frozen. This darkness spread out, and Yi Shiwen fell into it. It was as if he had fallen into a swamp. Taking advantage of this, the Dark Emperor muttered something, shaking his own laws. All his power and spirit were instantly ignited. Then, he blasted a punch towards Yi Shiwen. The terrifying power burst out in an instant. His fighting prowess rose to the peak in an instant. It was truly terrifying. Yi Shiwen let out a long roar. His whole body was emitting sword aura, and he kept slashing this dark power. At the same time, he did not want to be outdone. He clenched his fist and punched out. The fist energy pierced through the sky and shattered the void. That extremely powerful aura covered the land of the Dark Province. It leaped out and collided with the Dark Emperor. Bang! Terrifying power spread out. The two fists collided. Nothing could stop them. Both had raised their own power to the extreme. The Dark Emperor's body swayed slightly. He felt that his injuries had worsened. Yi Shiwen's strength was too terrifying. He was already above many Seventh Realm experts. In fact, he wasn't inferior to some Eighth Realm experts. This simple collision had directly aggravated his injuries. Because of this, he did not have much time left. He only had 10 moves. If he used more than 10 moves, he would definitely die. But he had no other choice. Opposite him, Yi Shiwen took 2 steps back. He felt the blood in his chest churn. The collision between the two was not just a collision of power. There was also a collision of laws and a great path. All of the essence and comprehension of both sides were vividly reflected in this one punch. Yi Shiwen felt as if he had understood a lot of things in this fight. The mysterious space within his body was crazily deducing everything. It seemed as if it wanted to deduce everything. To him, the experience of every exchange was equivalent to many years of bitter cultivation. Although he had to pay a hefty price, it was all worth it to him. But before he could think too much, before he could completely digest all this information, Dark Lord had already lunged at him again. He took a step forward, and it was as if he had crossed the entire galaxy. His body flashed with the light of secret techniques. Many of the secret techniques he had learned flashed in an instant, and they all possessed great power. The Dark Lord was very experienced in fighting, so he naturally knew that once his injuries started to worsen, it would be an irreversible trend. Even if he seized the time to rest, it would be meaningless in such a short time. On the contrary, he couldn't give Yi Shiwen any time to catch his breath. So, he directly pounced on him. Boom! He punched out, and the demon wings that had completely protected Yi Shiwen were immediately smashed. The violent collision only left a clanging sound. Sparks flew everywhere, and the bodies of the two Emperor Lords shook violently. At the same time, blood splattered from both of their bodies. Dark Lord's body was already severely injured. Another violent collision caused the wounds on his body to split open, and blood splattered everywhere. And Yi Shiwen's arm also cracked in the collision, and blood flowed out. It made him look even more murderous. Beep! A loud phoenix cry resounded, and a phoenix appeared behind Yi Shiwen. A huge power emerged, and the injuries on Yi Shiwen's body rapidly healed at a lightning speed. Die! But this time, Yi Shiwen roared once again and directly rushed forward. His spirit and body were burning to the extreme and almost instantly sublimated. It seemed as if he had integrated with the entire world. Relying on his recovery ability, which was far superior to Dark Lord's, he immediately rushed forward, holding the martial Emperor's seal in his hand, and pressed down on Dark Lord. Roar! Seeing that Yi Shiwen dared to counterattack, Dark Lord immediately roared and punched out. Boom! The terrifying attack shook the entire Dark Province, and the entire mountain range was turned to dust. In the Dark Province, many experts flew out and headed towards the battlefield. Although they didn't know what had happened, they knew that it was the place they were most worried about. The Dark Race didn't have an ancestral land like the Stone Race, but they knew that it had been passed down from generation to generation. It was the most important place in the entire Dark Race. Puff! Dark Lord spat out a mouthful of blood, coughing up large mouthfuls of blood. After all, he wasn't at his peak, and he didn't expect Yi Shiwen to use such a method to fight him. In the end, he had still suffered a great loss in this clash. Most importantly, the injuries in his body had been aggravated, causing his old injuries to relapse. Strands of golden, sovereign blood flowed out and splattered in the air. It was a shocking sight to behold. However, Yi Shiwen, who was opposite to him, was not much better off. The recoil force of the collision had made his entire arm dripping with blood. If one took a closer look, one could even see that there were numerous cracks on his arm. The Dark Emperor's eyes were filled with resentment. If he had been at his peak, he wouldn't have paid any attention to Yi Shiwen, who was at the peak of the Seventh Realm. He wouldn't have been afraid, even if Yi Shiwen relied on external forces. It was precisely because of his strength that he was able to turn the Dark Province into the Dark Tribe's territory, and the Fortune Divine Dynasty didn't dare to do anything to him. One had to know that even in the human and stone prefectures, although there was a major race leading them, there were still other races. However, in the Dark Province, the Dark Race was the dominant race. The other living beings were either driven away or killed by the Dark Race's butcher knives. He relied on his strength of the Eighth Realm, which was a terrifying existence that was only a step away from the Ninth Realm. Even the Fortune Divine Dynasty did not want to find trouble with him unless it was absolutely necessary. But now, only a few years had passed, and he was injured by the Sway Sovereign. Now, a human junior had invaded Dark Province. This was a sign that the entire Dark Race was going to be wiped out. Time had changed, and things had turned out this way. How could he be convinced? Weak. When I was at my peak, you weren't as arrogant as you are now. I could crush you in one fell swoop. Dark Lord spat out a mouthful of blood. You talk too much. If I had half the time you spent cultivating, even if you were at your peak, killing you would be as easy as flipping my hand. Dark Lord was confident, but Yi Shiwen was even more confident than he was. What he lacked now was time to cultivate, and what he lacked was a foundation. Arrogant, the Dark Emperor roared. His entire body's spiritual power began to burn. This part of the universe was ignited. All of time and space seemed to be ignited by some mighty power. This terrifying power drowned Yi Shiwen in an instant. Yi Shiwen had no time to defend himself, and he couldn't dodge it. Yi Shiwen felt as if the blood in his body was being drawn out and burning. This was a horrifying secret art, because the real danger was not outside, but inside his body. He didn't dare to relax, and he quickly used his power to forcibly suppress the blood in his body. He used the 3,000 martial paths to suppress the boiling blood in his body. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Although it was only one move, each move was more dangerous than 1,000 moves against others. However, the Dark Emperor took advantage of this moment to leap across the sky and arrive in front of Yi Shiwen. He stretched out his hand and slapped Yi Shiwen's body. Even with the protection of the chrono robe, Yi Shiwen was still hit, and he was severely injured. But he was not one to take a beating passively. At the same time, the sword of Avicii in Yi Shiwen's hand pierced through Dark Lord. Whoosh! Both sides were enraged, and it was another clash of life and death. But relatively speaking, this kind of battle was not worth it for Dark Lord. Although Yi Shiwen's cultivation level was lower, his blood was strong, and he didn't have any old wounds. But every attack he made would accelerate the deterioration of his old wounds. After a few moves, Dark Lord felt as if he was about to die. But he didn't want to give up. Even if he had to use such extreme methods, he would kill Yi Shiwen. It wasn't just because of the hatred in his heart, but also because he knew that this was the only way for the Dark race to survive. Even if the chances were slim, it was better than despair. Dark Lord, no matter what tricks you have up your sleeves, you will die today. I will finish what the Sui sovereign failed to do that day. Yi Shiwen roared. He didn't hate Dark Lord, but Dark Lord had to die. This was a matter of the Dark race, and he couldn't be soft-hearted. Boom! Yi Shiwen took a step forward, and Dark Lord's injuries worsened. Now that he had the upper hand, Yi Shiwen unleashed the Time Kingdom and locked onto Dark Lord. The monarch's seal in his hand smashed down. This time, Yi Shiwen won. Dark Lord grunted, and he exploded on the spot. His body exploded, and there was no way he could recover. He thought he could last 10 moves, but his injuries took his life. Chapter 3199. Under normal circumstances, he would be able to withstand 10 moves. However, Yi Shiwen's reckless fighting style made him unable to withstand even 10 moves. He died completely. His body exploded and turned into a bloody mist that fell on the ground of Dark Province. His spirit, which was already extremely weak, withered instantly. However, Yi Shiwen discovered that the entire Dark Province was on the verge of collapsing immediately after the Dark Emperor fell. The heavenly Tao of the entire Dark Province began to gradually collapse. Many laws were also collapsing at an alarming rate. Yi Shiwen was shocked and immediately began to calculate. Soon he understood why. It turned out that the true core, driving force of the Great Formation used to transform Dark Province was none other than the Dark Emperor himself. Apart from him, there was no other core that could maintain the Great Formation that covered the entire Dark Province. For many years, he had relied on the formation to transform Dark Province, making the environment of Dark Province suitable for the survival of the Dark race. However, at the same time, his entire body also merged with Dark Province. Because of this reason, he became a part of Dark Province's heavenly Tao and maintained the operation of that part of Dark Province's heavenly Tao. With his death, the laws of Dark Province naturally began to collapse. Yi Shiwen quickly began to transform the environment of Dark Province. After destroying the Great Formation and expelling the excess power of darkness, the situation in Dark Province gradually improved. Of course, this improvement was only for Yi Shiwen. For him, the Dark Province had finally stabilized. However, for the Dark race, it was tantamount to doomsday. The sunlight from outside shone in. For the ordinary Dark race creatures, it was tantamount to a disaster. In just a moment, large tracts of them were wiped out. Yishuin did not intend to kill all of them. He still left a part of the Dark Land. However, it was not as extreme as before. In the entire Dark Province, there was only one Dark Race. While Yishuin was stabilizing the laws of Dark Province, many Dark Race experts had already come to him. Although they could not wait to kill Yishuin, they were quickly killed. Facing Yishuin, they did not have any strength to fight back. At the same time, Yishuin's divine sense covered the entire Dark Province. He found the hidden experts of the Dark Race and killed them one by one. Those God Kings and Quasi-Emperors were all killed. The Dark Continent was ruled by the Dark Race. Their foundation was more deep-rooted than that of the Stone Continent. Because of this, Yishuin couldn't tolerate the existence of the experts. He had spared the lives of the ordinary Dark Race members. He had given them enough space to survive. Yishuin returned to Buzhou Mountain of the human race after he had pacified the Dark Province. Meanwhile, the patriarchs and leaders of the Thunder Lake had already gathered on Mount Buzhou. They were waiting for Yishuin's return. They hadn't received any news about Yishuin destroying the Dark Province. However, the news about Yishuin destroying the Sure family's ancestral land and destroying the hope of Sure family's revival had already spread throughout the Thunder Lake region. So, how could they dare to disobey? Even those who disobeyed had already been killed by the sky-shaking Thunder Emperor. In addition to the sky-shaking Thunder Emperor, many other big shots of the Thunderland had also surrendered to the human race. They had seen how Yishuin had killed the experts of the 3 clans with their own eyes. So, they naturally understood that they were nothing compared to Yishuin. With the support of these people, the clans of the Thunder Lake region who had tried to resist had been uprooted in a short period of time. The moment Yishuin returned to Mount Buzhou, everyone came to greet him. Yishuin didn't put on a cold face to these heroes of the Thunder Lake region because there was no need to do so. He had already established his immortal majesty. There was no need to continue to frighten these heroes of the Thunder Lake region. The heroes of the Thunder Lake region had already submitted to Yishuin. No matter whether they were convinced or not, they didn't dare to resist on the surface. The 3 clans who had the ability and courage to resist were either dead or injured. Just looking at them was enough to make them tremble in fear. After greeting the heroes of the Thunder Lake region, Yishuin asked them to leave. Only the Thunder Emperor stayed behind. Yishuin told the Thunder Emperor about his experience and insights on how he had broken through to the 7th level without any reservation. If it was said that others might have some blind guesses, then Yishuin had the help of the mysterious space. So, he knew how to break through to the 7th level very well. These were priceless treasures for the Thunder Emperor. He was different from Yishuin. Yishuin lacked a sufficient foundation, so he had to find ways to increase his foundation. However, he had been at the peak of the 6th level for many years. So, his martial power had already accumulated to a very profound level. So, he only lacked a little opportunity. And this was where Yishuin could help him. Yishuin might not have been so sincere if it were someone else. However, the sky-shaking Thunder Emperor was different. The sky-shaking Thunder Emperor was under Yishuin's control. He could kill the sky-shaking Thunder Emperor with just a thought. Therefore, Yishuin had nothing to hide. As for the Thunder Emperor's ability to escape if his cultivation was the same as Yishuin's, it was impossible. Even if the Thunder Emperor entered the 7th level, he would still be far weaker than Yishuin. Even if the Thunder Emperor could reach the same level as Yishuin one day, the Thunder Emperor's secret technique was not that simple. Because of this, Yishuin was so relaxed. He didn't set up any defense because there was no need to. On the contrary, the stronger the Thunder Emperor was, the better. It would be best if he could enter the 7th level. In that case, the human race would have 2 7th level experts. Then, the situation would be completely different. As for the human sovereign and Fengyi clan, although they had a lot of experience and secret techniques left by Yishuin, they couldn't be counted on to advance to the 7th level in a short period of time. They could only rely on themselves. After receiving Yishuin's unreserved teaching, the Thunder Emperor returned to the Thunder Lake for closed-door training. Next, Yishuan cooperated with the human sovereign and Fengyi clan to mobilize the human race's army. The human race had basically pacified the Light clan and occupied the human province. However, the other three provinces hadn't been touched yet, especially the Dark province and the Stone clan. They were in a state of no leader. They must occupy them as soon as possible. Otherwise, it would inevitably arouse the covetous eyes of the forces in the neighboring provinces. In that case, the human race would really be sacrificed for the others. Moreover, in the Shur province, there were other clans besides the Stone clan. They were also fighting for territories at the same time. They didn't know that the human race's army had already arrived outside the Shur province. Soon, Yishuan passed on his decree to the remaining clans in the Shur province. He asked their leaders to come and pay their respects. Among them, there were even 2 clans that had emperors guarding them. It was precisely because they also had emperors that they were able to defend their territory and prevent the Shur province from being completely occupied by the Stone clan. At first, they were very surprised. They didn't expect that the legendary 4 prefectural patrol envoy would deliver a decree to them. However, they soon thoroughly understood what was going on. It turned out that the 4 prefectural patrol envoy was responsible for the destruction of the Shur clan's ancestral land. Thinking of this, many people were completely terrified. Many of them had personally seen the situation of the Shur clan's ancestral land. How could they not know how serious the situation was? Because of this, they understood the power of the 4 prefectural patrol envoy. Soon, not only the Shur province, but also the Dark province's complete transformation reached their ears. The ancestor of the Dark clan, the Dark Emperor, was defeated by Yishuan. The entire Dark clan was left with only a small plot of land in the Dark province. The rest of the land had been transformed by Yishuan and returned to normal. This news was even more shocking. The Dark clan, which was powerful enough to be on par with the Stone clan, had been annihilated overnight. After that, the Thunder Lake had completely fallen under the control of the human race. Many experts of the Thunder Lake personally went to pay their respects to Yishuan. These news came one after another, completely crushing their psychological defenses. Under the suppression of such a powerful 4 prefectural patrol envoy, it didn't matter what kind of thoughts they had. In the face of absolute strength, they were too weak. Among the big clans that had been annihilated, their strength was not weaker than the human race. Even the Stone clan and the Dark clan were stronger than the human race. But so what? Their race was considered a large race in the Stone province. But compared to a behemoth like the human race, there was no way they could be compared at all. Soon, after struggling for a while, they personally came to pay their respects to Yishuan. Even the 2 emperors were no exception. They were also emperors, but their strength was not comparable to Yishuan's at all. In front of Yishuan, these people had agreed to work for the human race. They would become subordinates of the human race in the future in exchange for Yishuan's promise to let them stay. They wouldn't have to worry about being exterminated by Yishuan at any time. They couldn't help but secretly breathe a sigh of relief. Soon, they were sent back by Yishuan. They immediately mobilized their troops to cooperate with the human race in the Shur province. They encircled the remaining rebels of the Stone clan as the vanguard of the human race. At this point, Yishuan finally heaved a sigh of relief. His previous plan had been thoroughly completed. He had single-handedly pacified the resistance forces in the 4 prefectures. The rising trend of the human race was already irresistible. As long as the human race had thoroughly rooted its foundation in the 4 prefectures with the passage of time, they would have the foundation of a powerful race. Yishuan could finally find some time to go to the Martial Creation Pavilion and find a way to break through to the 8th realm. Chapter 3200. The news that Yishuan had pacified the 4 prefectures soon spread throughout the entire eastern region. This was because his actions were too big. There were only a few prefectures in the entire eastern region, but Yishuan alone had sealed 4 prefectures. How could this not attract attention? Although it was due to his outstanding achievements in fighting against the foreign allied forces, Yishuan's conquest of 4 prefectures in one go still attracted the attention of the newly promoted patrol envoy. If it wasn't for the fact that the person who made this decision was an experienced emperor like the Battle Emperor, it would have caused a lot of criticism. Although they didn't dare to criticize the Battle Emperor, they were very concerned about Yishuan. Yishuan had nothing to do in the first 3 years of his return, which made many people feel that he was just SOSO. Although the 7th realm was impressive, it wasn't easy to completely conquer the 4 prefectures. He would definitely be involved in the affairs of the 4 prefectures, and no one knew how many years it would take for him to get out. However, the reality was not what they imagined. Yishuan did not make a move for 3 years, but when he did, it was a massacre. Blood flowed like a river, and the people of the Thunder Lake were so scared that they returned to their homes. The Light Clan, Dark Clan, and Stone Clan were all killed, and only civilians were left. At this point, within the 4 prefectures, there were no longer any opponents of the human race. The rise of the human race was unstoppable. At this moment, everyone seemed to finally understand that Yishuan was not inactive, but waiting for those idiots to give him an excuse. Especially under the rule of the Fortune God dynasty, there were many powerful people in most regions, except for the central region. It was not a matter of a day or 2 for them to disobey the orders of the emperor. Yishuan came with the orders of the Fortune God dynasty, and the Dark Clan, the Stone Clan, and the Light Clan dared to openly resist. Although they didn't dare to kill Yishuan, they could still pretend to obey. This was also the usual method of these local powerful clans, and they even dared to unite against Yishuan. However, they didn't expect Yishuan to be even more ruthless than them. He used this excuse to kill all of them on the spot, and the higher-ups of the 3 clans were slaughtered. Within the 4 prefectures, there was no one who could fight against him. The crime of joining forces against the Fortune God dynasty was not a big one, but it was also a small one. After all, there was no real rebellion, and it all depended on how the rulers saw it. But now, Yishuan was obviously using a chicken feather as a token of authority and had blown this matter up. The Fortune Divine dynasty did not pursue the matter, especially the Dark Race's act of turning the entire Dark Province into their private territory. Other than the fact that there were too many tyrants to manage, how could the higher-ups not have any relations with them? Many people understood this point. However, Yishuan didn't care about it all. He annihilated all of them and brought the 4 prefectures under his command. This matter had left many people dumbfounded. Simply audacious to the extreme. This was the first reaction of many people when they heard the news. Yishuan's actions were too fast. He pacified the 4 prefectures in a short time. Therefore, he didn't give them any time to observe. Even if some people wanted to intervene, they didn't have the opportunity. Soon, Yishuan found out how many people were behind these clans. After he pacified the 4 prefectures, many reprimands came from various departments of the Fortune God dynasty. Obviously, Yishuan's actions had affected the interests of these people. And the people behind these incidents were big shots who could turn the Fortune God dynasty upside down with a stomp of their feet. So that's how it is. The current Fortune God dynasty has begun to rot from the inside. Yishuan sneered. On Mount Buzhou, Ren Huang and Fengyi clan's people had gathered in the Divine Court. The 3 of them were sitting on a cloud bed, facing each other. There are many people who have come to reprimand us. There will be a lot of trouble in the future. Ren Huang couldn't help feeling a headache. Even though he had become an emperor, there were many things he couldn't do as he pleased. He couldn't do as he pleased as the other emperors in other small worlds. There's nothing to be afraid of. They won't dare to do anything in the open. Yishuan sneered. This matter involved the big shots of the Fortune God dynasty, but none of them came forward. They only issued a reprimand in the name of the Fortune God dynasty. It was nothing more than reprimanding Yishuan for committing crimes, killing innocent people in their territory, and other nonsense. However, they couldn't show up directly. After all, it was an unspoken rule. Since it was an unspoken rule, they couldn't say it out loud. Although Yishuan didn't take these reprimands to heart, he also learned some things that he didn't know before. The Fortune God dynasty's indulgence was the main reason why these clans could develop and flourish in these places. the so-called unable to manage was just an excuse. The dark race must have transferred some benefits to the Fortune Divine Dynasty. That was the only reason why the Fortune Divine Dynasty could turn a blind eye to the dark race's actions, especially after the dark race had transformed the dark province into a place that only the dark race could live in. This had shaken the Fortune Divine Dynasty structure. If this kind of thing could be tolerated, many things were clear without saying. As for secretly, what can I do? Yishuin couldn't help but sneer. With his current strength, if he were to enter the Fortune God Dynasty, he would certainly hold a high position and hold an important position. At that time, there would be many small clans that would seek him for protection. There would be no difference between him and other people. Strength was the best guarantee. As long as they didn't openly attack him and force him to defect to the outer domain, everything else didn't matter. Moreover, he knew that this time he had affected the interests of many people. However, the most severe punishment was a decree. The main reason was the Battle Emperor's reputation. These old fellows didn't care about Yishuin's reputation, but they still had to give face to the Battle Emperor. Naturally, they wouldn't dare to act recklessly. This was also what Yishuin had expected. When the time came, he would have to rely on the Battle Emperor to avoid a lot of trouble. This was no different from others. With his current strength, he wouldn't be able to protect such a big plate. Inevitably, he would have to transfer benefits to the Battle Emperor. He suddenly understood. This world was like a game of chess. Then, the Battle Emperor was undoubtedly the chess player. Although he could barely be considered as a chess player now, he was still used as a chess piece previously. The Battle Emperor conferred the land of 4 prefectures to him. It wasn't that he didn't have the intention of using someone else to do his dirty work. Anyway, he had done a good job. As for the subsequent troubles, naturally, the Battle Emperor would take care of them. At least, he wouldn't face any big problems on the surface. This was a win-win situation. The human race won the land of 4 prefectures, and the Battle Emperor obtained another source of benefits. Land, companionship, technique, and wealth. These were the 4 essentials of cultivation. Ordinary people couldn't imagine the resources that these thearchs consumed for cultivation. Besides Yishuin's irregular method of accumulating wealth, most thearchs used this method to accumulate wealth. Whether it was from their tribe or from establishing their own sects, a large part of the reason was to obtain sufficient resources. Yishuin would inevitably embark on this path when the time came. This was a stable source of resources, and he could only rely on the human race. This was also the reason why he wanted to help the human race pacify the 4 prefectures. This was his foundation and also his future assistant. Naturally, he couldn't leave them alone. However, I also want to ask, did the human race not have anyone in the Fortune God Dynasty in the past? Yishuin asked. The human race had been suppressed so badly. Even the light race had bullied them. It didn't seem right. Originally, there was someone. After Master left, the person who had been helping our race unexpectedly died. The human emperor said with a bitter smile. If it wasn't for this, the human race wouldn't have ended up like this. I see, Yishuin said. No wonder the human race didn't have the love of their parents. It turned out that their backer had fallen. Although Yishuin always felt that it was better to rely on oneself than others, sometimes it was very necessary to rely on external forces. Fortunately, the patrol envoy has returned. For our human race, it is also a stimulant. Feng Yishur said. Yishuin didn't say anything. His cultivation was still a bit lacking. In the end, strength was still the most important thing in this world. I will go to the Fortune God's capital soon. I will leave the matters of the 4 prefectures to you. However, I have already dealt with most of the thorns. There shouldn't be any problems for the rest. Before the other prefectures have a clear understanding of the situation, they probably won't make a move. You should take this opportunity to completely integrate the forces of the 4 prefectures. When the time comes, the human race will have the ability to protect themselves. Yishuin said, Patrol Envoy, you must be careful when you go to the Fortune God's capital. Because of the matters of the Dark Race, Light Race, Stone Race, and Thunder Lakeland, I am afraid that some people are waiting to cause trouble for you. Feng Yishe hurriedly said. He naturally knew what the Fortune God's capital was. It was the core of the entire Fortune God dynasty and even the entire Fortune world. It was the capital of the Fortune God dynasty. No one knew how many experts were guarding the Fortune Divine dynasty. The depth of the Fortune Divine dynasty was not something that outsiders could imagine. Compared to the Fortune God's capital, the human prefecture where the human race was located was like a remote and desolate village. They couldn't be compared at all. Yishuan's strength was enough to run amok and be invincible. However, in the Fortune God's capital, he was nothing. Unless he had the strength of a battle emperor, he wouldn't be able to have a decisive position in the Fortune God's capital. I understand. I'm not going there for long-term development. I am only going to the Fortune God's martial pavilion to study. Yishuan nodded. He understood this very well. That was why he chose to return to the human prefecture instead of following the battle emperor to the Fortune God's capital. That's good. Feng Yishe nodded. He had heard about the Fortune God's martial pavilion. The stronger Yishuan was, the more benefits it would bring to the human race. I will leave the rest to you. I will leave first. If there is anything, just crush the jade talisman that I left behind. I will be able to sense it. After Yishuan finished speaking, he disappeared from the cloud bed, leaving Ren Huang and Feng Yishe looking at each other. Chapter 3201. The Fortune Divine Dynasty was divided into 5 regions, and the central region was located in the center. The fires of war rarely spread to the central region. Thus, it was the most prosperous region among the 5 regions. Moreover, the central region was directly under the Fortune Divine Dynasty and was also the core of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. There were many experts in the central region, more than the other 4 regions. From afar, one could see a terrifying worldly aura surging in the sky. In this place, even the top experts of the foreign regions would be suppressed, and the degree of suppression was related to their strength. The more powerful the expert, the smaller the suppression. This was a characteristic that the foreign regions did not possess. Since the establishment of the Fortune God dynasty, the foreign creatures had not been able to conquer the central region for many years. Yishuan looked around and saw many powerful auras lurking in the central region. These auras were stronger than in other places. This was the headquarters of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. The direction of the Fortune God capital was even more dazzling. Yishuan didn't even need to open his double pupils. Just by relying on the difference in aura, he could easily sense a pure and terrifying aura blooming in the distance. It was like a firefly in the night. It was too obvious. Like a giant beast lying in ambush on the endless land, it suppressed the aura of the entire Fortune God dynasty. Under Yishuan's perception, countless fortunes were converging in the direction of the Fortune God capital. The stronger the world was, the stronger the fortunes of the Fortune God capital would be. Cultivating in this place would yield twice the results with half the effort. It was no wonder that countless people tried their best to seek refuge in the Fortune God dynasty. They wanted to enter the Fortune God capital to cultivate. It was indeed an excellent place for cultivation. It was many times better than any famous mountains, rivers, or immortal paradise. Especially those experts who entered the secular world to cultivate. They were like fish in water. Their cultivation rose like a rocket. Although this would not directly affect the martial artists themselves, it would subtly affect the martial artist's cultivation speed. Yishuan directly released his aura. In an instant, heaven and earth sensed it. The purple aura stretched out for 30,000 miles, and the sound of chanting came from everywhere, as if countless people were worshipping him. After setting up the formation, it would save them a lot of trouble. Also, no one would go crazy and seek trouble with the sovereign emperors. Yishuan unleashed his full speed and directly used the space shuttle technique to shuttle through the various provinces of the central region. It went very smoothly. Many people didn't dare to come and look for trouble after sensing his aura. He flew for 3 days and 3 nights, and finally arrived outside the Fortune Divine capital. There were many arrays in the entire central region, and many small worlds were embedded in them. It was very troublesome. Even Yi Shiwen could only choose to take a detour in many places. Therefore, it had taken him several days and nights to get there. Yi Shiwen realized how majestic this city was when he arrived at the Fortune Divine capital. The city walls towered into the clouds. If one were to look up from the corner of the city walls, it would be impossible to see the top of the city walls. One could only see that the middle section of the city walls was already surrounded by countless clouds. It vaguely seemed as if the sky had been divided into two regions by these city walls. It was extremely shocking. The length of the city walls was so long that there was no boundary. Even with Yi Shiwen's eyesight, he could only barely see it. It was almost comparable to the size of a province. Such a huge area was actually a city. The Fortune Divine capital was worthy of being the world's most majestic city. Other famous majestic cities were a bit inferior to it. It was also the core of the Fortune Divine dynasty. In the past, the Fortune Heavenly Lord built the Fortune Divine capital as the foundation and the beginning of his expansion. In this city, there were powerful arrays and boundaries everywhere to protect it. It could be said to be impregnable. Even with Yi Shiwen's current ability, the chances of him escaping were not high if he were to act recklessly here. It was precisely these arrays and boundaries that isolated everyone's divine senses. Otherwise, with so many experts in the city, there would be no sense of security at all. Soon, Yi Shiwen arrived at the southern gate of the Fortune Divine capital. A 10,000 feet tall city gate was open all year round. Many people were queuing at the gate to enter. There was no shortage of all kinds of creatures. Among them, there were even many creatures that were thousands of feet tall. Under the influence of the boundaries, they had to shrink to the size of ordinary people. No matter how fierce they were in the outside world, they didn't dare to act rashly in the Fortune Divine capital. The soldiers stationed at the city gate were all wearing iron armors that had traces of time. It was unknown how many years ago each of these iron armors had been worn. It was just that with the passage of time, not only had they not been damaged, but they had also become even more terrifying. These soldiers trained day and night, and had become extremely terrifying. With Yi Shiwen's perception, he naturally understood that a casual attack from these soldiers could cut down a divine king with a battle spear. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This was the true strength of the Fortune God dynasty. Compared to the Fortune God dynasty, the gap between the human race and the Fortune God dynasty was too wide. Not only was the human race's foundation lacking, but the Fortune God dynasty was also supported by countless races. No matter how strong the human race was, it could not be compared to the millions of races in the world. The Fortune Divine monarch was indeed a great person. He had a big mind, which allowed him to accommodate all the races in the world. Yi Shiwen wasn't in a hurry to enter. Instead, he stood at the side and sent a message talisman into the Fortune Divine capital. Then, he waited at the side. Those soldiers didn't pay attention to Yi Shiwen just because he was an emperor monarch. In the Fortune Divine capital, emperor monarchs weren't rare. They weren't as rare as they were outside. A figure flew out of the city in a moment and arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. This person was dressed in an imperial robe and had the aura of a supreme master. Who else could it be if it wasn't Emperor Li? Taoist martial emperor, it's rare for you to come to the Fortune Divine capital. Why didn't you inform me earlier? I could have gone to receive you earlier. Emperor Li said with a laugh. He didn't have the slightest indifference from when he was in the Stormy Sea area. In his heart, Yi Shiwen was already in existence comparable to him. No, it should be said that Yi Shiwen was even more terrifying than him. In the face of such a powerful person, even if he couldn't rope him in, he didn't want to become enemies with him. Congratulations, Taoist martial Emperor Li. You've finally entered the 7th realm. Yi Shiwen cupped his hands and said with a smile on his face. He could already see that Emperor Li had already entered the 7th realm. Because he was also in the 7th realm, he was very sensitive to the aura of the 7th realm. However, Emperor Li had obviously just broken through, so his aura was still a little unstable. This was why Yi Shiwen could easily sense it. It's all thanks to you. If it weren't for your help, I wouldn't have been able to enter the 7th realm so quickly, Emperor Li said with a smile. As the saying goes, People are in high spirits when they encounter happy events. Emperor Li was like this. After entering the seventh realm, in a place like the Fortune Divine capital where experts gathered, he was a big shot and had a very high status. Although he was only one realm away from Yi Shiwen, the treatment he received could not be compared at all. And his breakthrough this time had a lot to do with the trip to the Stormy Sea area. Because of this, it was not wrong for him to thank Yi Shiwen. What can I do to help? It's mainly because of your years of accumulation, Yi Shiwen said with a smile. Unlike Yi Shiwen, Emperor Li had been in the peak of the sixth realm for many years, like the sky-shaking Thunder Emperor. Therefore, his breakthrough was just a matter of course. It was not the same thing as Yi Shiwen, who had forcibly used all kinds of means to accumulate foundation and improve. When Emperor Li heard this, he said, "I still can't compare to you, my friend." He could not help but sigh. When he first heard about Yi Shiwen could not pose any threat to him at all. But now, Yi Shiwen's strength was still above him. Even if he had stepped into the seventh realm, in his perception, Yi Shiwen was still so unfathomable, and he could not detect the depth at all. He naturally understood that the gap between him and Yi Shiwen had not become smaller, but had become even larger. How could he not sigh? But it was just a sigh. After all, everyone had their own opportunities. And my friend, your actions during this time are really earth-shattering. Ha! I heard that a few old guys even broke their cups. Emperor Li laughed loudly. Although he was in the Fortune Divine capital, he was obviously very clear about what Yi Shiwen had done. It could be said that he knew everything like the back of his hand. I didn't expect this to spread to the Fortune Divine capital. Yi Shiwen shrugged and said with a slight smile, as if he did not hear the subtle warning in Emperor Li's words. He understood that Emperor Li was reminding him that some of the old emperors might be angry and waiting to find trouble with him. And Yi Shiwen was already prepared, so he did not take it to heart. Isn't that so? The situation in the region has long been complicated. I don't know how these old guys are related to it. There are very few who dare to deal with it. Emperor Li said with a smile, but I also admire you. Just like that, my friend, you won the development of 4 prefectures for the human race. The future of a human race is limitless. These things are still unknown. Yi Shiwen did not care and continued. This time, I found you mainly because I'm not familiar with the Fortune Divine capital. I want you to take me to the Fortune Martial Pavilion. Fortune Martial Pavilion. Is the reward from before? That's great. Sigh. I have served the Fortune Divine dynasty for many years, but the number of times I have entered the Fortune Martial Pavilion is also limited. Emperor Li sighed and then said, "My friend, come with me first. Since you have come to my territory, at least let me give you a welcome dinner." Chapter 32:02. Well then, please lead the way. Yi Shiwen nodded and did not refuse. Although breaking through to the 8th realm was an urgent matter, it was not urgent to this point. Well, please follow me. Emperor Li nodded and said. After that, he took the lead and turned into a ball of light and disappeared. Then, Yi Shiwen also turned into a group of light and chased after it. When he passed through the enchantment of the city wall, Yi Shiwen clearly felt that the enchantment swept over his body. After confirming that he was not a foreign creature, it disappeared without a trace. As for the guards of the city gate, they did not even look at him, or rather, they did not dare to meddle in other people's business. The business of the emperor was not something that they, the guards, could meddle in. Although the emperor's words were not as powerful as in other places, they were still not someone that ordinary people dared to meddle in. Moreover, based on their many years of experience as guards, these two were not ordinary emperors. They simply could not afford to offend them. The two of them flew all the way into the Fortune Divine capital. The entire Fortune Divine capital was different from other places. Towering buildings could be found everywhere. It was a bit like the skyscrapers of Yi Shiwen's previous life. However, it was unknown how many times more gorgeous the classical buildings were in comparison. They were magnificent and majestic, with carvings of dragons and phoenixes. They were extremely luxurious. Thousands of meters Tens of thousands of meters tall buildings could be seen everywhere. In this divine capital of fortune, there are not even poor people. Everyone was a master, or in other words, ordinary people could not survive here at all. This was also not a place for ordinary people to live. This was the core of the entire divine capital of fortune, and also a martial arts holy land passed down by word of mouth by many creatures in the remote areas of the divine capital of fortune, a real legendary place. The vast majority of living beings had never left the province they were born in, especially those remote places like the Fortune Divine Dynasty and Fortune Divine Capital. Those were existences that only existed in legends. Soon, a huge restaurant appeared in front of the two, Drunken Immortal Source. Taoist Emperor Wu, Drunken Immortal Source is a first-class restaurant in our divine capital of fortune. It has existed even before I achieved Tao. The wine and delicacies here are also superb. Emperor Li introduced. This restaurant was brimming with a simple and unadorned atmosphere. The richly ornamented beams and painted rafters were full of traces of time. Looking from afar, it seemed as if he could see the long river of history flowing through this place. It indeed had a special charm. Yi Shiwen was slightly surprised when he heard Emperor Li's introduction. Emperor Li had attained enlightenment for at least 10 million years. However, this restaurant had a longer history than Emperor Li's. He was afraid that there was an extraordinary person supporting it from behind. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for it to persist until now. However, these things had nothing to do with Yi Shiwen. On the contrary, the fine wine and delicacies mentioned by Emperor Li had piqued his interest. Even an emperor-level character like Li Emperor is praising the wine and dishes of this drunken immortal source. It seems that it's absolutely not bad. Yi Shiwen said with a smile. Of course, here, as long as you can pay the price, you can even catch emperor-level creatures from the outer realm. Emperor Li's seemingly casual words had shocked Yi Shiwen in his heart. An ordinary person couldn't have captured an emperor-level creature from the outer domain. At the very least, it would take a team of sovereign emperors to serve them in captivity in order to achieve such a feat. The background and ability of this drunken immortal source could be said to be terrifying. However, he soon felt relieved. It was impossible for the drunken immortal source to be able to survive in a place like the divine capital that was filled with experts for countless years without any foundation of strength. Moreover, he didn't know which superpower was involved in this matter. After Emperor Li said this, he just smiled and then led Yi Shiwen into the drunken immortal source. This drunken immortal source was bustling with people coming and going. The business was flourishing. There were no ordinary people coming and going. Any random person was a peak divine king, or even a quasi-emperor level character. Occasionally, one could even see sovereign emperors. The two quickly entered the drunken immortal source. Suddenly, bursts of fragrance assailed their nostrils. They didn't know what delicious food it was. Yi Shiwen had eaten dragon liver and phoenix marrow before, but it was not as fragrant as this. This drunken immortal source could stand for so many years without collapsing. In addition to the backing behind it, it really had its own outstanding points. The two had just entered the drunken immortal source. Before they could do anything, suddenly, they saw a quasi-emperor walking over from afar. After bowing to the two, he said, "Two sirs, I wonder if you are free. My master invites you." "Who is your master?" Emperor Li said with a slight frown. He was a little unhappy. It should be known that he and Yi Shiwen were great figures who had already entered the seventh realm. In the Fortune Divine Capital, they were great figures with a very high status. This person dared to not put them in his eyes and only sent a follower to invite them. He was simply looking down on them. Although this quasi-emperor was already a peak quasi-emperor and could step into the sovereign emperor realm at any time, in the eyes of Emperor Li, he was no different from other ants. Although it was said that he could step into the sovereign emperor realm at any time, everyone knew that the probability of a peak quasi-emperor entering the sovereign emperor realm was very small. Even if he entered the sovereign emperor realm, could he be compared with him? "Sirs, please calm down. My master only ordered me to invite you too. He did not mean to look down on you too." This peak quasi-emperor was also very perceptive. He could see the displeasure in Emperor Li's heart. However, he said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Obviously, the master behind him was also very important. Even if he was facing the newly promoted Minister of Justice, Emperor Li, he was not afraid. Friend Emperor Li, please don't be angry. Since someone invited us, why don't we go and have a look? Yi Shiwen said with a slight smile. He was not angry. He knew that this quasi-emperor was just a follower. There was no need to be angry with a follower. Moreover, he was also a little interested in someone who could make a peak quasi-emperor as a follower. With his status and strength, if he waved his arm, a large number of quasi-emperors would come from all over the world to seek refuge. However, he would not treat these quasi-emperors as servants. Although these people had not entered the sovereign emperor realm, they were dragons and phoenixes among men. Not to mention the peak quasi-emperor. These people who were close to the peak quasi-emperor were not simple people. Some of their qualifications were even better than some sovereign emperors who had entered the sovereign emperor realm. They just lacked an opportunity to enter the sovereign emperor realm. How could Yi Shiwen, who had also crossed that line, not know this? Well, let's go and have a look, Emperor Li said. How could Emperor Li not understand what Yi Shiwen understood? He did not want to lose his temper. He was just a little unhappy. Both of you, please come with me. The quasi-emperor quickly led the way in front and led the two into a private room. They saw a beautiful woman with snow-white skin in the private room. This woman was dressed in a gorgeous outfit. She looked a little more heroic. Emperor Li was originally a little angry. However, when he saw this woman, he suddenly frowned and had a rather helpless look. It turns out to be you. Emperor Li could not help but say. This little girl greets the two Taoist brothers. The woman said with cupped hands. Although her voice was as melodious as a silver bell, her salute was quite attractive. What's wrong? Brother Emperor Li doesn't seem to want to see this little girl. The woman said with a slight smile. No. Taoist Brother Huang is thinking too much. Emperor Li quickly said. What's wrong? You two are familiar with each other. Won't you introduce me? Yi Shiwen said from the side. However, he did not mean to be angry. He just felt a little surprised. This woman gave him a somewhat unfathomable feeling. She was definitely an empress. Moreover, her cultivation was so profound. It was completely beyond Yi Shiwen's expectations. Since he started cultivating, he had never seen an empress with such profound cultivation. There were indeed hidden dragons and crouching tigers in the divine capital of fortune. He had really underestimated the people of the world. Just meeting one of them made him feel a little threatened. Then let me introduce you. Taoist Brother Wu Di. This is Taoist Brother Huang. Taoist Brother Huang. This is Taoist Brother Wu Di, the four prefectures patrolling envoy from the human province. Emperor Li smiled bitterly and then introduced. Yi Shiwen's mouth raised into a smile. The name of Emperor Li was extremely famous in the Stormy Sea region. It could be said that he was an existence that could stop children from crying. However, now he had a helpless look on his face. What was going on? This Huang was definitely not simple. It turns out to be Taoist Brother Wu Di. It's an honor to meet you. Huang smiled slightly. However, looking at her appearance, it was definitely not the first time she had heard of this. Obviously, she already knew Yi Shiwen's identity. It's just a false reputation, Yi Shiwen said immediately. I took the liberty to invite the two of you here. Please forgive me for being rude. Huang said softly with a smile. There's no need to say anything rude. Taoist Brother Huang, I think my meaning should have been very clear. I am a chief officer of the Ministry of Justice. It's really not convenient for me to join your Blue Sky Association, Emperor Li said. It's okay. I also know that. I invited the two of you here this time because I want to get to know a genius like Taoist Brother Wu Di, Huang said with a smile. She did not look angry because Emperor Li had seen through her thoughts. In that case, we will take our leave first. Today is the first time that Taoist Brother Wu Di has come to the divine capital of fortune. I am holding a welcome dinner for him. Come and visit again when you have time, Emperor Li said and hurriedly left. Obviously, he did not want to stay here for a moment longer. Yi Shiwen bowed slightly to express his apology. Then, he left with Emperor Li. He also wanted to ask what was the meaning behind this. It made Emperor Li act like a mouse that had seen a cat. He couldn't wait to avoid him. It should be a very interesting matter. Chapter 3203. Awang's smile faded as she watched the two figures disappear from the private room. My lord, with Emperor Li around, I'm afraid it won't be that easy to win over this martial emperor. At this time, the peak quasi-emperor who originally led the way for the two couldn't help but say, how can it be so simple? He can't be a simple person if he can cultivate to this level. Even if there is no Emperor Li, he won't accept the recruitment so casually, said a Huang faintly. Obviously, she was very clear about Yi Shiwen. The peak quasi-emperor continued, but according to the information we received, this martial emperor seems to have some connection with the battle emperor. He may be a subordinate of the battle emperor. A subordinate of the battle emperor? You're thinking too much. That's just a show for outsiders to see. This martial emperor is not a simple character. How could he possibly submit to the battle emperor? Although the battle emperor is powerful, I'm afraid he won't be able to control him. The simplest point is that the first thing he did when he arrived at the divine capital of fortune was not to pay a visit to the battle emperor. Perhaps the battle emperor has the intention to take care of him, but it's not to that extent. Huang said. As she spoke, she stretched slightly, revealing the beautiful curves of her body. Her expression was languid like a kitten. My lord, why do you value him so much? There are countless people in the Fortune Divine Capital who want to join our Clear Sky Association. It's fine if he doesn't know how to appreciate favors. The peak quasi-emperor said without looking sideways. He didn't dare to look at the beautiful scenery in front of him. Otherwise, his life would be in danger. Idiot, can an ordinary emperor be compared to him? Moreover, I've checked all his information. Since he came to the Fortune Divine Dynasty, it's only been a short time, but he has already entered the 7th realm from the 3rd realm. This speed is amazing. His future achievements are simply limitless. If we don't win over such a talent, should we wait for him to be won over by others? Awang's expression returned to normal. She looked a little more decisive and heroic, and a little less languid. Due to the imperfection of the world's laws, emperors from other worlds will have a big breakthrough in their strength in a short period of time after coming to the Fortune God Dynasty. This is a very common thing, but his rate of improvement is really shocking. We must think of a way to win him over. Awang said. A glint of wisdom flickered in her eyes. No one knew what she was planning. Yi Shiwen and Emperor Li came out of the box together. Yi Shiwen casually casted a magical power to isolate the probing. Then, he said, Friend Emperor Li, who is this Huang? She can even make things difficult for you. Seeing this, Emperor Li stopped and said, She is not the one who makes things difficult for me. It is the Blue Sky Association that she represents. Is the Clear Sky Association very powerful? Is it more powerful than your Ministry of Justice? Yi Shiwen asked. As far as he knew, in the Fortune God Dynasty, the Ministry of Justice was one of the top departments. Whether it was strength or connections, they were all over the Fortune God Dynasty. Emperor Li had stepped into the 7th realm and was regarded as the chief official of the Ministry of Justice. He was valued by the higher-ups and was heavily groomed. His identity and status were no longer the same as before. Unexpectedly, there was still an existence that could make him wary. That's not it. You can't compare them like this. The Ministry of Justice is a big department established by the Fortune God Dynasty. Naturally, there are many experts. However, this Blue Sky Association is not a regular department of the Fortune God Dynasty. In fact, it can't even be considered a subordinate of the Fortune God Dynasty. It is a civilian organization. Emperor Li said, a civilian organization actually dares to invite you, the chief official of the Ministry of Justice, to join them. They're too bold. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but say in surprise. This was blatantly recruiting an official of the Fortune God Dynasty. It was simply courting death. Even if the Battle Emperor wanted to recruit him, he would have to do it in the name of the Fortune God Dynasty. Not to mention, it was a civilian organization. Who was this Blue Sky Association? In short, It is very complicated. There is an extremely powerful person behind this blue sky association. Even I don't know who he is. Maybe I will find out when I become the chief official of the Ministry of Justice one day. Emperor Li continued. If it was an ordinary civilian organization that dared to recruit experts of the Fortune God dynasty so blatantly, it would be equivalent to a rebellion. It would be destroyed in minutes. However, this Blue Sky Association is different. Although I don't know who that powerful person is, as far as I know, those who can join the Blue Sky Association and become official members are all above the 7th realm, without exception. In the past, with my cultivation, I didn't have the right to be recruited. It's just that a while ago, when I entered the 7th realm, I received an invitation from the Green Sky Association, but I rejected it. I have a position in the Ministry of Justice, so how could I join this kind of civilian organization? Emperor Li had only said a few words, but he had already sketched out a colossus in Yi Shiwen's mind. This organization had a huge background, and it had the backing of a big shot. Moreover, the starting requirement to join the organization was the 7th realm or above. This Blue Sky Association was absolutely not nervous. This made Yi Shiwen a little vigilant. He was only at the 7th realm. He could be considered strong, but he could also be considered weak. If someone wanted to torture him, he was afraid that it would be really difficult. Judging from today's situation, Taoist Wu Di, you should be under the nose of the Azure Dragon Association. I am afraid that there will be trouble in the future. Emperor Li said, I am the chief official of the Ministry of Justice. No matter how bold they are, they will not dare to do anything to me. But, Taoist Wu Di, you are only a nominal inspector of the 4 prefectures. When the time comes, they will inevitably come looking for you. I don't know where this Along came from, and what is her status in the Azure Dragon Association? Yi Shiwen asked. Compared to Emperor Li, he was more afraid of this Along. She actually had an aura that even he was afraid of. This Along is a peerless master who has risen in recent years. Her cultivation time is not as long as mine, but her cultivation speed is faster than mine. I have just stepped into the 7th realm, but she is said to have already stepped into the 7th realm. Since her debut, she has been the military advisor of the Azure Dragon Association. It is said that many of the action plans of the Azure Dragon Association came from her. Therefore, she is a very difficult person to deal with. If you can avoid her, it is best not to, Emperor Li said. He naturally understood that these words, especially the last suggestion, were more or less deep words. However, he still remembered that Yi Shiwen had helped him in the past. At this time, he could not bear to see Shiwen fall into a quagmire, so he opened his mouth to remind him. This Blue Sky Association sounds very powerful. I don't know what this Blue Sky Association is for. How can the higher-ups of the Divine Dynasty tolerate the existence of such an organization? Yi Shiwen could not help but ask. Sai, I'm not very clear about the specifics, Emperor Li said. I only know that many members of the Blue Sky Association are interested in reforming the current situation of the Xinyang dynasty. They want to restore the prestige of the Xinyang dynasty. Instead of calling them an organization, they are more like a like-minded society. Yi Shiwen was secretly surprised that such an organization had appeared. It seemed that there was something wrong with the Fortune God dynasty. Otherwise, the Clear Sky Association wouldn't have appeared. Regardless of whether their plot was true or false, the fact that they had a slogan that everyone knew was enough to explain some problems. However, according to the situation he understood, the Divine Dynasty was indeed not as powerful as it was in its heyday. The local powerful clans and sects ran amok, and the foreign expeditions had gradually changed from the original offensive to the defensive. This scene seemed like the scene of a dynasty falling into a dead end. Suddenly, he felt that a storm was coming. The Divine Dynasty was far from being as powerful and mysterious as he had imagined. However, he was not willing to care about these things. The most important thing was to improve his own strength. I understand, but I don't want to care too much. Let's go in and eat, Yi Shiwen said. Emperor Li nodded slightly, and then led Yi Shiwen into a private room. This was a private room that he had reserved for a long time. It could be opened at any time. Soon, in the drunken immortal source, many delicious wines and delicacies were served. The two exchanged toasts, and it seemed that the previous incident with the Huang had not affected the host and guest. After eating, Yishuan did not stay for long. After bidding farewell to Emperor Li, he went to visit the Battle Emperor. In any case, the Battle Emperor had fought for the identity of the 4 prefectures patrol envoy and other rewards for him, which had benefited him a lot. In any case, he had to pay a visit to the divine capital of fortune. However, when he found the Battle Emperor's mansion, he was told that the Battle Emperor had already left the divine capital of fortune. It seemed that he had gone to suppress a rebellion, and it was unknown when he would return. Yishuan was slightly surprised. He was very clear about the strength of the Battle Emperor. It could be said that he was unfathomable. What kind of rebellion would require such a powerful figure like the Battle Emperor to go? However, he did not ask much. Since the Battle Emperor was not around, he went directly to the Martial Creation Pavilion. Although it was his first time coming to the divine capital of fortune, he had already asked Emperor Li for a map of the divine capital of fortune during the banquet. Although it did not involve any secrets, some key points were marked on it. After finding it, Yishuan did not need to search blindly like a headless fly. Martial Creation Pavilion. For bold and powerful words floated in the clouds, faintly discernible. Every word seemed to contain endless great Tao, deeply engraved in the void. Yishuan finally arrived at the Martial Creation Pavilion. His arrival quickly attracted the attention of some powerful existences, and divine senses swept over him one after another. I am a martial emperor. I have received orders to come to the Martial Creation Pavilion to comprehend martial arts. Yishuan said, "You are indeed a martial emperor. You can go in, but you must remember that your time is limited. Remember to come out before the time limit." An old voice said. Chapter 3204. The guards of the Martial Creation Pavilion had already confirmed Yishuan's identity, but the figure had never appeared. Yishuan tried to find him with his divine senses, but there was still no trace of him. However, Yishuan gave up immediately. This was the Martial Creation Pavilion, the holy land of martial arts in the entire Fortune God dynasty. How could there not be a powerful existence guarding it? Suddenly, a sound of Tao came from afar, and Tao flowers scattered in the sky. A luxurious carriage came from the sky, and the entire carriage was like a gorgeous palace. Yishuan could see that inside this magnificent palace, there were countless fairies dancing gracefully. Countless strong men were accompanying them. It seemed as if they were serving a supreme existence. However, he did not pay much attention to it. Among the emperors, there were existences who lived like ascetics, and there were also existences who lived extremely luxurious lives. There was no right or wrong. The path of an emperor was walked by oneself. To be able to reach this step, there was no right or wrong. It was just that the path was different. An emperor had his own majesty. However, Yishuan did not provoke him. Instead, he saw someone flying out from the carriage palace, heading straight towards Yishuan. It was a woman with a refined temperament, dressed in a gorgeous palace dress. Her figure was graceful, and her appearance was outstanding. However, there was a somewhat arrogant look on her face. "Are you that martial emperor, Yishuan?" the woman said. Yishuan frowned slightly, feeling unhappy. He could see through this woman's cultivation with just a glance. She was only in the divine king realm. Not only did she not show proper etiquette in front of him, but she actually dared to be so arrogant. The more powerful a person was, the more they could not tolerate the slightest bit of disobedience from others. "Who are you?" Yishuan asked. "You don't even know who I am. My lord ordered me to come here to tell you that you dared to annihilate the Light Clan. It is a crime punishable by death, but as long as you hand over 60% of the profits of the 4 prefectures, my lord will forgive your reckless action this time." The woman said arrogantly, "As for who my lord is, I think you have a way to find out. Are you from Emperor Tian Yi's mansion?" Yishuan said coldly. If he didn't know the identity of the person who had come, he knew now. It was because Emperor Tian Yi was the backer of the Light Clan. He was also an extremely powerful emperor in the Fortune God dynasty. It was said that he had entered the ninth realm and was an existence that could summon the wind and rain in the Fortune God dynasty. That's right. Since you already know about my master, I advise you to find a day to come and apologize. As long as you are willing to submit to my master, your position in the human race will be as stable as Mount Tai. The woman said, as if it was a matter of course. Kneel! Yi Shiwen shouted loudly. The arrogant woman immediately cried out in alarm. Then her body involuntarily knelt down, trembling, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't stand up again, as if she was suppressed by some kind of power, but she couldn't find a trace of it at all. At this moment, a great fear crept into her heart. She finally remembered who this person before her was. He was an iron-blooded person who had massacred the upper echelons of the 4 prefectures in a short period of time and single-handedly pacified the 4 prefectures. Putting aside his identity, just his strength alone was that of a high and mighty god emperor. What did she count for? In the eyes of the vast majority of people, a god king was indeed awe-inspiring, but in the face of a god emperor, it was nothing. Moreover, this person had slaughtered more than 10 imperial monarchs in the 4 prefectures. 10 imperial monarchs. Just thinking about it caused her entire body to tremble. She didn't have such a feeling in the past because she had that extremely powerful existence standing behind her. Everyone would give her some face, and as time passed, even she herself forgot that she was just a fox borrowing the tiger's might to intimidate others. She wasn't that tiger herself. At this moment, the fear of the emperor that was suppressed in the bottom of her heart suddenly crawled all over her body. She finally understood why she couldn't get up. It was not because of Yi Shiwen's influence. It was simply the suppression of a different level of life. How dare you? After the fear spread all over her body, she let out a sharp scream, trying to dispel the fear in her heart. Why wouldn't I dare? Who do you think you are? How dare you yell in front of me? Yi Shiwen sneered. She was just a fox using a tiger's power to intimidate others. He didn't even bother to argue with her. What he was thinking about was not the matter in front of him at all. The powerful overlords who ran amok in a region were all simple people. Most of them had their own backers in the central region. The powerhouses of the Fortune God dynasty who served in the central region did not have their own exclusive territory. It was impossible for them to have a continuous income. At this time, it was quite important for the people below them to seek refuge. Previously, because the human race couldn't find a backer, it was slowly eroded by the Light Clan. In the end, only half of the human race was left. If it weren't for Yi Shiwen's return, it would not be surprising that the human race would be annihilated by the Light Clan one day in the future. Perhaps they would leave the human province and find another place to live. The reason why the human race couldn't find a backer was related to Emperor Tian Yi. If it weren't for his obstruction with the human race's situation, as long as they were willing to transfer benefits, they wouldn't have to worry about not being able to find a reliable backer. It was Emperor Tian Yi who obstructed them. Obviously, Emperor Tian Yi supported the Light Clan and hoped that the Light Clan would replace the human race to become the overlord of the human province. Although Emperor Tian Yi couldn't directly take action because of the rules of the Fortune God dynasty, with his tyrannical existence, as long as he played tricks behind the scenes, it was enough to make the human race passive. Now, he actually asked for 60% of the income of the 4 provinces. It was simply taking drastic measures. Generally, this kind of transfer of benefits was only 10% to 20%. After all, the local powerful clans still needed to develop. How could they give more? Taking away 60% in one go was tantamount to making the human race have no more potential to develop in the future. Any race that wished to develop would have to rely on countless resources. This was an unchanging truth. Even now, Emperor Sky Wing was still scheming against the human race. How could Yi Shiwen not be angry? Originally, he only had the offerings of the Light Clan. Now that it had expanded to the 4 provinces, the ratio of offerings was even higher. Did Emperor Tian he really think that Yi Shiwen would swallow his anger and endure it? He was really confident. After being high and mighty for so many years, he probably didn't understand and didn't want to think about what other people thought. Yi Shiwen naturally understood. As the saying goes, ask for a sky-high price and pay the low price. However, Yi Shiwen didn't even have the intention to pay the low price. The human race still had to walk their own path. There would never be a day of success if they relied on others. Moreover, in his opinion, if he really wanted to rely on someone, wasn't the Battle Emperor much stronger than Emperor Tian-Yi? Even if Emperor Tian-Yi had entered the ninth realm, he still couldn't be compared to Battle Emperor, who had followed the Fortune God Heaven Lord to battle everywhere since the era of the Fortune God Heaven Lord. After thinking about this, Yi Shiwen wouldn't give Emperor Tian-Yi any face at all. Moreover, in his opinion, Emperor Tian-Yi simply had another plot. It was useless to compromise or not. How dare you? Suddenly, a deep and cold voice came from the palace of the carriage. Yi Shiwen didn't pay attention to the woman who was kneeling on the ground. He just looked at the carriage. In the carriage, an aura was gradually getting stronger. Suddenly, a figure jumped out and instantly appeared in front of Yi Shiwen. Suddenly, a long blade appeared in his hand. It emitted an astonishing ray of light and split the sky curtain in half. It then rushed directly towards Yi Shiwen's face. Child's play. Yi Shiwen shouted and directly punched out. This punch disrupted the heaven and earth. It was completely chaotic and transformed into 6 paths of reincarnation. Bang! The long saber was smashed into pieces on the spot, and the saber light collapsed. The long saber also turned into a mass of spiritual qi, which dispersed in all directions. This was not a real Tao artifact. It was just condensed from the spiritual qi of the world. It might be useful to deal with ordinary people. However, for Yi Shiwen, he wasn't even afraid of Tao tools. He even dared to resist it, let alone this kind of weapon that was condensed from spiritual energy. And in front of him, a figure finally emerged. It was a man in a luxurious robe with a dignified face. Behind him, there was a pair of wings. One could vaguely see the condensation of the Tao. The runes on the wings flowed like flowing water. These are not ordinary wings, but Tao wings. The wings were condensed from the Tao. This was obviously a very powerful Tao, and these Tao wings were the concentrated embodiment of this Tao. You are Emperor Tian-Yi? Yi Shiwen asked. How dare you? I kindly gave you a way to live, but you dare not cherish it. Emperor Tian-Yi didn't answer, but he just said coldly, kindly gave me a way to live? Ha ha ha, what a joke. Do you think this is a way to live? Yi Shiwen couldn't help but sneer. His expression became colder and colder. The person in front of him looked so repulsive. Young man, I know you came from the outside world, but the Fortune God dynasty isn't as simple as you think. Do you think you can protect the land of the 4 states alone? Emperor Tian-Yi asked coldly. You don't have to worry about whether I can protect it or not. You want me to rely on you? You'd better save it. Yi Shiwen also said, not to be outdone. Stubborn. Imperial Lord Skywing let out a loud roar and roared in anger. He grabbed at the void with his hand, and a long saber appeared on the spot. He swept it out, and the saber light transformed into a terrifying vortex of the great Tao that slashed downwards. I already said that you want to hurt me with this level of attack. Yi Shiwen sneered. He reached out with one hand and turned it into a dragon claw, directly tearing the saber shadow apart. Then his claw grabbed Emperor Tian-Yi's chest and blasted him away on the spot. Chapter 32:05. Bang! Sovereign Lord Heavenly Wing grunted, and his body was sent flying. Wherever his body passed, black cracks would appear in the sky. If they weren't in the divine capital of fortune, such power would be enough to destroy a world. A bloody hole appeared in Monarch Skywing's chest. Cries of shock rang out from within the palace as well. None of them had expected that Monarch Skywing would actually be heavily injured, even though he had personally attacked. Good, very good. Emperor Tian-Yi was so angry that he laughed. Blue veins appeared on his face. He was angry and anxious. He never thought that Yi Shiwen would force him to this extent. If Emperor Tian Yi was here, I might be afraid of him. It's still too early for you to act like a tyrant in front of me with just a Taoist body, Yi Shiwen said indifferently. He had already noticed that Emperor Tian Yi was merely a Taoist body. However, this Taoist body was different from the ordinary Taoist body that was condensed from a little spirit. It was cultivated using a secret technique. Its strength was very strong. It was even stronger than an ordinary emperor. Therefore, Emperor Tian Yi dared to attack him. But he never expected that he would be much stronger than he imagined. Not bad. At this time, in the void, some experts were communicating with their divine senses. These were the top existences who usually guarded the Fortune Martial Pavilion. With their ability, they could naturally see that Emperor Tian Yi was just a Taoist body here. But they did not expect that Yi Shiwen could easily defeat Emperor Tian Yi's Taoist body. Although it was just a Taoist body, Emperor Tian Yi's ability was enough to suppress ordinary emperor lords. This is definitely not an ordinary seventh realm. It is indeed not a fluke that he is allowed to enter the Fortune Martial Pavilion to cultivate. These experts were stationed in the Fortune Martial Pavilion all year round, so they did not know what was happening outside. They could only vaguely know about it. I have seen his recommendation letter. It said that he was allowed to enter the Fortune Martial Pavilion because of his meritorious service in stopping the foreign creatures from invading Storm City. He is allowed to enter just by stopping the foreign creatures. It seems that he has done a lot of meritorious service. Emperor Tian Yi, is definitely not a person who will swallow humiliation. This is interesting. But is it really good to let them continue fighting here? Someone asked with uncertainty. As long as they don't enter the Creation Martial Pavilion, who cares if they die? Someone said without a care in the world. Martial Emperor, how dare you? Emperor Skywing rose to his feet. Although he was just a Tao body, he naturally had his own dignity. He wouldn't allow anyone to challenge him at all. Get lost, Yi Shiwen said indifferently. Let's see how long you can be so arrogant. Emperor Skywing bellowed and formed a seal. A mysterious power seemed to tear open a huge hole in the void. Then, a powerful force surged into Emperor Skywing's body like a river. That kind of power was clearly the same. Yi Shiwen's pupils contracted slightly. It was Emperor Tian Yi's main body that had made a move. He had made a move from a distant place. At this moment, the demon wings on Yi Shiwen's back suddenly spread open. His main body instantly flew out and instantly appeared in front of Emperor Tian Yi. 6 paths of reincarnation. Yi Shiwen bellowed and punched out directly. Emperor Tian Yi's face was filled with shock and anger. He didn't expect Yi Shiwen to dare to attack so directly. The pair of Tao wings behind him flew in front to block Yi Shiwen's 6 paths of reincarnation fist. But how could Yi Shiwen give him such a chance? He shattered the entire Tao wings with a punch. Rumble! A series of loud explosions rang out. The sound of the Tao was real, and the wings of the Tao were shattered, turning into waves of sound that spread out in all directions. Bang! After Yi Shiwen's 6 paths of reincarnation fist shattered the Tao wings, it didn't lose its momentum. It was like a hot knife through butter and suddenly hit Emperor Tian Yi's chest. Puff! Emperor Tian Yi suddenly groaned. He felt a sweetness in his throat and spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body retreated continuously and couldn't stop at all. The channel in the void that transmitted power also completely collapsed at this moment. Under the situation where Emperor Tian Yi himself was blasted away, there was no way for the channel to be maintained. The divine king woman who was kneeling on the ground was directly swept into ashes in such a collision. Both sides didn't care about her existence and couldn't even be bothered to care about her. Naturally, she couldn't resist and died a tragic death. Bang! Emperor Tian Yi hadn't stabilized his footing when Yi Shiwen punched again. It was as if the power of the entire world was concentrated in this punch. He was blasted away on the spot and directly hit the carriage palace. However, the carriage palace was obviously also a high-grade magic tool. It didn't turn into ashes from the collision. Only a series of exclamations came from it. Many people were blasted away by the power transmitted from inside. Martial Emperor, you actually dare to attack me. You are dead. You have really angered me. When my main body arrives, it will be the time of your death. Emperor Tian roared. His life source was burning, and even the Great Way Law was burning. All the power in his body was concentrated on his wings, and there was a terrifying flame burning. This was a method of mutual destruction. Even if he could defeat his opponent, he wouldn't be much better off. However, he couldn't care about this at this moment. Moreover, although he was condensed by a secret technique, he was only a Tao body. If he really died, it wouldn't affect his main body much. Therefore, he wanted to save his face at this time. So, he truly displayed his final trump card. His wings carried unimaginable power and converged into a torrent. It formed a kingdom and rushed towards Yi Shiwen to annihilate him. He vowed to kill Yi Shiwen on the spot. At this moment, even the many powerhouses in the void who didn't show themselves could feel the power contained in this torrent. Emperor Tian is going all out. I'm afraid he has really been provoked this time. Isn't that so? This martial emperor is going to be in trouble. Yi Shiwen didn't have the slightest intention to retreat. He just snorted coldly and then blasted a punch. Facing the torrent swept by Emperor Tian, he didn't dodge and blasted it fiercely. Bang! This torrent seemed to have encountered a terrifying existence, and it collapsed. It couldn't hurt Yi Shiwen at all. Then, Yi Shiwen's 6 pads of reincarnation fist turned into the Avicii sword in an instant. Pucci! The sword of Avicii pierced through Empyrean Lord Skywing. The core within Empyrean Lord Skywing's body, the core that maintained this secret art, was also pierced into powder. Empyrean Lord Skywing's body was finally unable to hold on any longer, and it began to collapse inch by inch. After killing Emperor Tian, Yi Shiwen just looked coldly into the distance. There was a pair of eyes staring at him. Obviously, they hated him to death. However, Yi Shiwen didn't take this matter to heart. He was too clear that the weak were prey to the strong in this world. If he agreed to Emperor Tian Yi's request, then the backing of the Dark Race and the backing of the Stone Race would come looking for trouble with him. What should he say then? In the face of such a dangerous situation, it could only be said that it was like a boat sailing against the current. If he didn't advance, he would fall back. If he retreated, these people wouldn't let him go, and it would only fuel his arrogance. After killing Emperor Tian, Yi Shiwen was about to keep the carriage palace into his pocket. However, when Yi Shiwen wasn't paying attention, Emperor Tian directly escaped and turned into a ray of light to escape. Yi Shiwen didn't want to chase after him, because he clearly felt that a powerful aura was coming. Yi Shiwen, who was slightly regretful, turned around and stepped into the Martial Creation Pavilion. As soon as he stepped into the Martial Creation Pavilion, he immediately felt a force of space acting on his body, sending him into another world. Yi Shiwen stepped into the Fortune Martial Pavilion and immediately saw rows and rows of huge bookshelves. Books were placed on the bookshelves. Some are martial arts manuals, some are magical secret techniques, some are classics, and some are personal notes. There were all kinds of books. Everything that one could wish for was here. Even with Yi Shiwen's eyesight, he couldn't see the end at all. This was indeed the true core of the entire Fortune God dynasty, the martial arts holy land of the entire Fortune domain. Moreover, Yi Shiwen opened his double pupils and could see that each of these books had been accumulated over a long period of time. After being baptized by the spiritual power of heaven and earth, they had actually formed secret realms and kingdoms. Some are military books. One could hear the sound of killing everywhere. One after another, the sound was deafening. The neat, murderous aura seemed to penetrate through the books and affect the world. In the books, Yi Shiwen could see all kinds of military tactics. They were actually alive, constantly repeating and practicing in that side of the world. As the number of times they were practiced increased, these military tactics actually became more and more exquisite. This made Yi Shiwen click his tongue in amazement. He had seen ancient books evolve the true meaning of the book, but he had never seen these ancient books evolve by themselves. Moreover, the more they evolved, the more perfect they became. This wasn't something that could be achieved by ordinary means. This meant that these ancient books had truly developed their own will, and were not simply the embodiment of the contents of the books. This martial creation pavilion was really amazing. Yi Shiwen looked as far as his eyes could see in addition to these military books. He could see many classics of various clans. Each of these classics was describing a kind of profound meaning, a kind of Tao, and a kind of profound meaning. Each word represented a kind of Tao and was very outstanding. Even Yi Shiwen felt that it was an eye-opener when he saw many of the Tao. He did not expect that there was such a wonderful Tao in this world. Although it was not as good as his Tao, it was still a very good supplement for him. In addition to these, there were some martial arts manuals and magical secret techniques. They actually transformed into human figures, practicing martial arts and magical techniques. Chapter 3206. The Creation Martial Pavilion was indeed extraordinary. Yi Shiwen could see a powerful aura seeping out wherever he looked. It was often left behind by the ancient books. The essence, qi, and spirit condensed and did not dissipate. After many years, it finally formed an essential change. If Yi Shiwen wrote the scriptures carefully, he would naturally be able to achieve such an effect. This was an ability that only an emperor could have. His words were the law, and whatever he wrote was the great Tao. The great Tao that was originally unfathomable, unseen, and untouchable was completely manifested in the hands of these emperors. However, if an ordinary force had an ancient book left behind by an emperor, it would be the most precious of treasures. But here it was everywhere. The Fortune God dynasty had been established for countless years. In this process, it was impossible to count how many monarchs had been born and how many monarchs had fallen. Even a colossus like the Heavenly Tao sect might not even have a tenth of the Fortune Martial Pavilion's collection of ancient books and records. This was the real reason why the Fortune Divine Dynasty could rule the world and suppress all forces. Relying on these treasures, the Fortune Divine Dynasty could continuously produce new Emperor Realm experts, and the Emperor Realm experts who joined the Fortune Divine Dynasty could grow continuously. Whether it was in terms of quantity or quality, they could suppress all forces in the world. If Yi Shiwen had not chosen to join the Fortune God dynasty, he would not have had the opportunity to enter this place. Although Yi Shiwen also knew that he was at most a high-status non-staff member in the Fortune God dynasty, and was not an elite talent cultivated by the Fortune God dynasty, Yi Shiwen did not care. The waters of the Fortune God dynasty were too deep. Whether he could stir up trouble or not was one thing. He did not have the intention to do so. How to enter the 8th realm was the most important thing. Once he entered the 8th realm, he would not be far from the 9th realm. In this era where heavenly masters were in hiding, the 9th realm was enough to do many things. Yi Shiwen walked forward and arrived in front of an ancient book. This ancient book was filled with a cold aura. Every molecule of this aura was composed of the talisman of the great Tao. It was left behind by an emperor who was proficient in the Ice Tao. Yi Shiwen gradually unraveled the many mysteries in this ancient book. Although they were both emperor monarchs, Yi Shiwen's strength was stronger than this emperor monarch who was proficient in Ice Tao. In other words, Yi Shiwen's strength and realm were higher than when he had left this ancient book. He would not be able to cultivate in this place for a long time, just 1,000 years. Although it might seem like a long time for sovereign emperors, this amount of time was nothing more than a split second. How much one could comprehend depended on the individual. Therefore, many people would only come here when they were about to make a breakthrough in their cultivation. Every opportunity to come here was extremely rare and required many battle merits to exchange for it. However, more than 1,000 years was enough for him to do a lot of things. After all, he had the help of the mysterious space. As long as the dragon vein could provide him with an endless supply of energy, he would be hundreds or even thousands of times more efficient than others. Soon, The word ice appeared in front of Yi Shiwen's eyes. It was condensed from the comprehension of the great way of ice described in this ancient book and supplemented Yi Shiwen's 3,000 martial paths originally, with Yi Shiwen's own strength. Even if he could deduce the 3,000 martial paths, it would be relatively limited. However, it was different now. With the help of the power of these emperor monarchs, the deduction speed of his 3,000 martial paths was even faster. There was no weakness at all. This was his Tao and the foundation of his invincibility. Yi Shiwen grabbed the word ice in his hand and directly immersed it into his body. After that, he did not hesitate. He walked and stopped along the way, all the way inside. His reading speed was extremely fast. He could almost finish reading very quickly. He also comprehended the great Tao that belonged to him and integrated it into the 3,000 martial paths. In the end, Yi Shiwen directly evolved 3,000 figures. It was the 3,000 martial paths. Each martial path transformed into a human figure. Then, they flew towards the ancient book in the huge martial creation pavilion that matched his own great Tao. They absorbed the thoughts within and produced their own comprehensions. In an instant, Yi Shiwen's comprehension speed was almost 1,000 times faster. Fortunately, the mysterious space was processing this information. Otherwise, even with Yi Shiwen's ability, he could not process so many things at the same time. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen only felt that many comprehensions were surging towards him like a tide. They were directly imprinted into the depths of his soul. Every kind of comprehension, as long as he saw it once, would not be forgotten. He felt that his originally incomparably sturdy 8th realm barrier had begun to loosen. Although these great Tao were left behind by the various emperor monarchs, not all of them were compatible with him. In fact, there was a huge difference between the paths they took. It was like one was towards the light, while the other was towards the darkness. They were two completely different paths. On the path of an emperor monarch, it was rare for there to be a repetition. They were all completely different. However, stones for mountains could be used to improve jade. To Yi Shiwen, these people's great Tao often gave him the feeling that he had obtained the most precious treasure. It might be difficult to find in other places, but here, in this vast sea of ancient books, there would always be some that made Yi Shiwen feel amazed. Therefore, Yi Shiwen felt that his own realm was rising. The more his 3,000 great Tao was perfected, the smoother his future path would be. Stepping into the 8th realm was not the end. He still had to step into the 9th realm, and even the supreme heavenly lord realm, until he obtained the good fortune realm. And everything he was doing now was for the sake of this goal. Every minute and every second, Yi Shiwen's aura was rising. There seemed to be no end to it. It was like a torrential mountain torrent pounding against some solid existence. Behind him, many martial arts also appeared. Under the illumination of the enlightening mind ancient tree, they emitted colorful rays of light. At the same time, in front of Yi Shiwen, the mysterious creation pill floated up and down, constantly rotating. Every time it rotated, a long river of pill energy would be separated and then poured into Yi Shiwen's mouth. Every time, Yi Shiwen absorbed a portion of the pill energy from the mysterious creation pill. He would rapidly transform it into strength. This speed could be said to be extremely shocking. Perhaps an ordinary emperor monarch would need to cultivate for a year to be able to transform his strength. With the support of the mysterious creation pill, he only needed 1 day to achieve this. And while he was absorbing the pill energy from the mysterious creation pill, the mysterious creation pill was also gradually shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. The pill energy had been absorbed by Yi Shiwen, so naturally there was not much left. Finally, when there was only 1/3 of the mysterious creation pill left, Yi Shiwen felt that the power in his body had accumulated to an astonishing level. It was like a flood that had accumulated for countless years, and it was finally time to erupt. Boom! Suddenly, the aura on Yi Shiwen's body had climbed to the peak, and it seemed as if it had finally broken through some obstacles. It rushed over in one breath, and then this aura grew bigger and bigger, as if it had washed away all the barriers in the blink of an eye. Originally, when he had just broken through, it was possible for his realm to regress again. However, Yi Shiwen's martial power had accumulated to the limit. Under his many calculations, the accumulation of his martial power had long been unfathomable, so he rushed over in one breath. There was no need to stabilize his realm, because it had been directly stabilized, so it was impossible for his realm to fall again. After stepping into the 8th realm, Yi Shiwen suddenly felt that his martial power had improved a lot, and his understanding of the Great Way seemed to have improved a lot. It was like there was originally a piece of cloth that covered your eyes, but now, after Yi Shiwen had used his own efforts to remove this piece of cloth, everything suddenly became clear, and everything was under his control. Although he had just broken through not long ago, based on his understanding of himself, he was afraid that the current him could easily defeat the original peak of the 7th realm. It was just a breakthrough, but everything was completely different. The methods that could be used in the 8th realm, the heavenly way that could be comprehended, were not comparable to those in the 7th realm at all. This point he had truly understood after truly stepping into this realm. There were 9 realms of imperial monarchs, and the gap between every single realm was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. Every single imperial monarch was an extraordinary genius, but even then, there were countless imperial monarchs that were trapped in the 1st realm and were unable to advance even an inch for tens of millions of years. Yi Shiwen's progress was already very shocking. I finally stepped into the 8th realm, just as I expected. In the martial creation pavilion, cultivation is really fast. Yi Shiwen said slowly. This was just as he had expected. After spending 300 years, he had finally stepped into the 8th realm. But in these 300 years, he had also consumed more than half of the dragon vein in his body. Every martial Tao that was comprehended in those martial Tao incarnations could not be completely comprehended without the mysterious space, and that mysterious space had to devour countless energy. These accumulated enough to make an ordinary Emperor Lord's heart ache, but Yi Shiwen did not care. The most important thing was to increase his strength. Everything else was fleeting. After stepping into the 8th realm, even if Emperor Tian Yi personally came, it would be impossible to kill him. In other words, he had the ability to protect himself in front of experts in the 9th realm of Emperor Lord. This was the most important thing. With such strength as a foundation, he did not need to worry about the threat of Emperor Tian Yi and the others. He had pacified the 4 provinces, but he did not only touch Emperor Tian Yi alone. It was just that those people behind the scenes had not appeared yet, but Yi Shiwen did not doubt that they would make a move sooner or later. Therefore, Yi Shiwen did not care about the price. Only by increasing his strength to the point where he could protect himself before they made a move was the way of the king. Thinking of this, Yi Shiwen's eyes were resolute. His figure flashed, and he flew towards the depths of the martial creation pavilion. Chapter 3207. In the depths of the martial creation pavilion, there was a country of flames, a world of flames. There was nothing in this world, only endless flames burning. The endless flames were the existence that made up everything. However, within these flames, there were also some fire spirits born. These fire spirits quickly developed and became famous, forming countries. They fought against each other and gave birth to the god of flames, the divine kingdom of flames. Everything was related to flames. It completely went against the principles of life and gave birth to a world. Suddenly, on this day, a huge hand came from the horizon and grabbed towards the entire world. Countless flame gods flew up in an attempt to defend against it. However, they were unable to do anything at all, let alone them. Even their worlds were destroyed by that gigantic hand in an instant. It turned into a ball of the most original flame. Yi Shiwen looked at the original flame in his hand and immediately extinguished it. It integrated into his body and was devoured by the fire phoenix in his body. That was formed by the Nanming Leaf fire. In front of him, the original kingdom of flames turned back into a classic. There was only one word on it. The original world of flames and the kingdom of flames were also evolved from this word. Although Yi Shiwen had taken away a part of the original flame, it would soon evolve again. Yi Shiwen did not intend to take the entire classic away. These different ways of flames could improve his understanding of the way of flames. It was also extremely beneficial to his cultivation of the Nanming leaf fire. He also insisted on using the Nanming leaf fire as the main one. All the other flames were absorbed into it and formed a huge flame cultivation system. There were simply too many countries and worlds formed because of the classic in the martial creation pavilion. It was impossible to count them all. In the blink of an eye, another 500 years had passed. He had been in the martial creation pavilion for more than half of 1,000 years. In these 500 years, his cultivation had become more and more profound. He had completely absorbed the Xian creation pill. The medicinal power of these pills had been completely transformed into his cultivation, increasing his strength bit by bit. In just 500 years, he was no longer at the bottom of the 8th realm. He could even feel that he had touched the peak of the 8th realm. He was only a little bit away. This was the result of him absorbing the great Tao and comprehending the great Tao left behind by the sovereign emperors without stopping for a single moment over the past several hundred years. In these hundreds of years, with the help of the mysterious space, he had seen countless classics. The remaining level 2 dragon vein in his body had been completely consumed. It would be very difficult for him to progress by leaps and bounds like before. After all, the price one had to pay to comprehend without reference, and comprehending with reference was completely different. It was almost several times more. Yi Shiwen intended to spend the next 200 years looking around. He didn't necessarily need to understand them, but he needed to remember them. He had an intuition that if he wanted to break through to the 9th realm in the future, these would be the most crucial assistants. They were very important. Suddenly, he felt his heart palpitate. He could only feel the Tao scripture stone in his body start to emit a shocking light. Yi Shiwen did not expect the Tao scripture stone to emit light at this time. In this period of time, most of his attention was placed on the classics in the martial creation pavilion. As for the Tao scripture stone inscription, he had already put it aside. There were not many opportunities to enter the martial creation pavilion, so he naturally had to hurry. As for the Tao scripture stone inscription, he could put it aside. There was still time to comprehend it in the future, so there was no hurry. And at this time, the Tao scripture stone inscription actually began to emit bursts of light. He also felt that the Tao scripture stone inscription seemed to be guiding him towards a certain direction. Yi Shiwen was a little curious because he knew that the Tao scripture stone inscription was originally placed in the martial creation pavilion. Later on, it wandered outside. Could it be that there were mysteries within it that he did not know? He immediately stopped resisting. Instead, he followed the guidance of the Tao scripture stone inscription and flew towards a distant place. Yi Shiwen flew all the way in and saw a huge world appearing in front of him. Compared to the other countries, this world was dozens of times bigger. Moreover, Yi Shiwen could even feel a sense of good fortune in it. The taste of good fortune was present in it. It's actually the feeling of good fortune. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and immediately flew in. He had just entered when he immediately felt that the surrounding world actually began to reject his existence. It was as if the worlds was rejecting him. He immediately activated the Time Robe's divine kingdom of time and drove this repulsive force aside. He wanted to find out why the Tao scripture stone inscription would have such a reaction. What exactly was contained in this world? Therefore, he was not in a hurry to destroy this world. However, he soon discovered a shocking fact. This world was actually the good fortune realm. No, it should be said that it was very similar to the good fortune realm. Because he came from the outside, he was very clear about what the real good fortune realm was like. And this world was very, very similar to the good fortune realm. The mountains, rivers, and even the auras of many forces were exactly the same as the good fortune realm. Could it be that this world was actually a projection of the good fortune realm? Many thoughts flashed through Yi Shiwen's mind. Countless information was being deduced at an extremely fast speed. Suddenly, he heard a loud, roar coming from the depths of this world. Who the hell is it? How dare you trespass into this heavenly lord's world? Heavenly lord? What the hell is it? Come out quickly. Yi Shiwen shouted coldly. His entire body's aura spread out. Then, he saw that the world that resembled the good fortune realm began to collapse inch by inch. In the end, this was not the real good fortune realm. Otherwise, based on the world will of the real good fortune realm, it would not be on the verge of collapse from Yi Shiwen's aura. This made Yi Shiwen even more certain that this was simply a counterfeit of the good fortune realm. It was not the real world at all. Humph! Then, a figure appeared in front of Yi Shiwen. It was a tall and handsome figure with a supreme aura. Who are you? Yi Shiwen asked. You're really a barbarian. You don't even know this heavenly lord, the good fortune heavenly lord. This person had a somewhat sneer on his face. It was as if he had seen a country bumpkin. There was even a bit of hidden disdain in his expression. Good fortune heavenly lord? Yi Shiwen's heart shook because he suddenly remembered the legendary portrait of the good fortune heavenly lord. In the portrait, didn't the good fortune heavenly lord look like this? Almost for a moment, he almost thought that this was the rebirth of the good fortune heavenly lord. However, he instantly ruled out this speculation because the good fortune heavenly lord had the ability to change the world. He was a great figure who had created the good fortune divine dynasty by slaughtering his way out of the endless foreign creatures. During the years when he was in power, the good fortune divine dynasty continued to expand and beat the foreign creatures into a sorry state. The good fortune divine dynasty's territory continued to expand, which led to the current saying that the good fortune divine dynasty had 5 territories. Such a terrifying figure was even above the heavenly masters. How could it be possible for him to hide in this counterfeit good fortune realm? If the good fortune heavenly lord wanted to reconstruct the good fortune realm, he would not have created such a counterfeit. Who the hell are you? How dare you pretend to be the good fortune heavenly lord? It seems that you are courting death. Yi Shiwen looked coldly at the self-proclaimed good fortune heavenly lord in front of him. This heavenly lord said that I am the good fortune heavenly lord. Why would I lie to you? The good fortune heavenly lord said impatiently. He seemed to firmly believe that he was the good fortune heavenly lord. Even Yi Shiwen could not see that he was lying. In other words, a person who had reached this stage did not need to lie at all. It was easy to see through. Apart from becoming a laughingstock, there was no use in lying. Moreover, no one would believe that he was pretending to be the good fortune heavenly lord. They would know once they tested his strength. It would be easy to see through him. So, where did he come from? Since you don't want to admit it, I'll peel off your skin and see what kind of thing you are. Yi Shiwen shouted and stomped on the ground. In an instant, the whole world was filled with cracks. It was as if it had suffered a terrible blow and would be destroyed in the next moment. How dare you? The good fortune heavenly lord was furious. Yi Shiwen did not put him in his eyes at all. This made him furious. At this time, he finally made his move and shot out a palm. In an instant, it seemed as if only this palm was left in the world. Everything was captured and sucked into it. In other words, this palm of his represented all the great ways. This palm of his could give birth to a world and also destroy a world. Its strength was terrifying to the extreme. Yi Shiwen's expression became slightly dignified. It was not that he had not seen the classical evolution of the world during this period of time. However, those worlds were very fragile and could not withstand a single blow from him. However, the self-proclaimed good fortune heavenly lord in front of him was completely different. Not only did he have the realm of an emperor, but he was also not weak among the emperors. This palm faintly contained the transcendental great ways. Just one palm contained everything. It was the first time that Yi Shiwen had seen such a powerful palm technique. However, the more it was so, the more Yi Shiwen was interested in finding out the truth behind all this. Chapter 3208. Although the person in front of him could not possibly be the fate creation heavenly monarch, there should be some connection. Not everyone could have the strength of an emperor. If any scripture could evolve into an expert of the emperor level, then the martial fortune pavilion would be in chaos. No one knew how many scriptures were stored in the entire martial fortune pavilion. These scriptures could form a powerful clan. Considering their own heritage, it would be a very terrifying thing. The martial fortune pavilion had existed for countless years, but such a thing had never happened. This meant that this should be an exception. Or, even if there had been such cases, the martial fortune pavilion's guards had already eliminated them. One or two scriptures that gave birth to an emperor was not enough to shake the foundation of the fortune god dynasty. But if there were hundreds or thousands of them, then the situation was completely different. These scriptures left behind by the emperor had evolved into a scripture that could evolve on its own. Although the speed of evolution was very slow, and the probability of giving birth to an emperor was very small, it was undeniable that it did exist. It was like the birth of artificial intelligence in a computer. Perhaps it was accidentally set up in a wrong program, and no one could explain why. There were too many life forms in this world, so many that Yi Shiwen did not dare to say that he could understand all of them. Therefore, he had to figure out whether this was a coincidence or an inevitability. If it was something else, perhaps he would not even have this thought. But this was different. This represented the fate creation heavenly monarch, the legendary strongest person since ancient times, the invincible existence that had reshaped the world and created supreme greatness. Ever since the disappearance of the fate creation heavenly monarch, everything he left behind had been safeguarded and hidden in the depths of the fortune god dynasty. With Yi Shiwen's identity as an outsider, if he served the fortune god dynasty for tens of millions of years, he might have the opportunity to come into contact with one of them. But obviously, Yi Shiwen did not have that much time, nor did he have that much patience. Moreover, his body still contained the Tao Scripture Stone inscription that the fate creation heavenly monarch had left behind. He was also drawn here by the stone inscription, so he was even more eager to know what secrets were hidden within. Once he unraveled it, perhaps he would obtain great benefits. With his current status and strength, there were fewer and fewer things that could attract him. But the things related to the fate creation heavenly monarch were always in the first place. Boom! The two sides collided, and the terrifying power from both sides spread out, almost destroying the entire world. Yi Shiwen remained motionless, but the fortune-seeking heavenly monarch retreated several steps. The light of wisdom flashed in Yi Shiwen's eyes. He was calculating all kinds of data. With just one strike, he had thoroughly distinguished that the strength of the fortune heavenly monarch was around the seventh realm. However, the power that erupted from this set of palm techniques had the strength of the eighth realm. Although it was still a little weaker than his own, it was still shocking enough. After a long time, a fiery and longing look once again appeared in his eyes. A palm technique that could make one's strength leap to the next level seemed to be everywhere on the street and was not rare at all. However, to sovereign emperors, this was practically impossible. They were all sovereign emperors and could be considered geniuses among countless living beings. They were the proud sons of heaven, standing out from countless living beings. They lacked strength, luck, vision, and intelligence. Each of the martial arts created by these sovereign emperors was enough to destroy the world. They were all supreme sons of heaven who walked their own path. Who would be worse than the other? Yi Shiwen was also confident that he was indeed the best among the many sovereign emperors with the 3,000 martial arts path and the martial emperor seal technique he created. But even so, the limit of what he could do was to crush the experts of the same realm. It was difficult for experts of a higher realm to kill him. Relying on this, he was invincible among the many sovereign emperors. When he had just broken through to the seventh realm, he dared to fight with the peak of the eighth realm spirit emperor and came out unscathed. Although it was because of the barrier's protection, it was enough to prove his tyrannical strength. Yi Shiwen had never been overly arrogant about his own ability, nor would he belittle himself. He was very clear about his own ability. He had been trying to break through the barrier of the sovereign emperor realm, but he had never succeeded. It was too difficult, not to mention the sovereign emperors of a higher realm. Even the sovereign emperors of the same realm were peerless geniuses. They were great existences that would only appear once in countless years. It was true that he was very strong, but if he really treated others as idiots, then he would become the biggest idiot. Yi Shiwen was very clear that he could not use his 3,000 martial arts path and the martial emperor seal technique to display a combat strength that exceeded the realm because his vision was not enough. Quasi-emperors would never understand the height of the sovereign emperors, the breadth and width of their vision. Similarly, his vision was actually limited. It seemed to be extremely broad, but for others, it did not have an overwhelming advantage. The strength of the sovereign emperors was fundamentally related to their vision. The more they knew, the stronger they would naturally be. Seeking the Tao was a process of continuous exploration and continuous knowledge. Therefore, Yi Shiwen never let go of any opportunity to increase his knowledge. Stones from other mountains could be used to improve jade. No one understood this better than Yi Shiwen, because he had the mysterious space, the wisdom of others, and the Tao of others could be used by him and enlightened by him. But even so, his accumulation was still not enough. He had not reached the stage where quantitative change could lead to qualitative change. He even suspected that the so-called celestial masters might be essentially no different from the sovereign emperors. It was just that their understanding of the Tao had reached a stage where quantitative change could lead to qualitative change. But no one could explain this clearly. He had never come into contact with a celestial master. Even if there were celestial master-level experts in the fortune realm, no one dared to study them. Unless they said it themselves, no one could figure out what the mystery was. But this set of martial arts in front of him made Yi Shiwen's eyes light up. A martial art that could be upgraded to another realm could come from a celestial master, or it could also come from the legendary Fortune Heaven Lord. No matter what, he had to obtain this martial art, no matter how much it would cost to use. With this palm technique, he could even have the ability to fight with the experts of the ninth realm. And this was perhaps the most important thing he had gained from entering the Fortune Martial Pavilion this time. Thinking of this, Yi Shiwen suddenly moved. He was like a matchless demon god that had awakened from an endless slumber, awakening from the chaos. He was extremely domineering. He clenched his 5 fingers into a fist and turned it into a terrifying fist force. It directly smashed the ancient tranquility and blasted towards the Fortune Heaven Lord with a terrifying power that surpassed the understanding of the world. This was the first time Yi Shiwen had displayed his strength to the extreme since entering the 8th realm. Facing the Fortune Heaven Lord, he did not want to delay any longer. He simply erupted with all his strength. The 6 paths of reincarnation fist turned into a huge 6 paths of reincarnation, blooming with dazzling immortal light. At this time, the Fortune Heaven Lord also seemed to have realized that the person in front of him was not an ordinary person. He raised the strength of his entire body to the extreme and condensed it together. Then he slammed his palm down. His entire body seemed to have completely merged with the palm. Or at this moment, he was the palm technique, and the palm technique was him. Fortune Universe Palm. The Fortune Heaven Lord sneered and slammed the palm technique. Boom! The collision between the two caused the flowers of the great Tao to bloom. The dazzling radiance from both sides burned fiercely. At the same time, it seemed like there were countless experts chanting scriptures. This scene seemed to have become eternal. Among the emperors, existences of the 8th realm were considered supreme experts. At this moment, the collision directly blasted a hole in the world. Even the worlds that evolved from the ancient books were alarmed. They could not understand why such a terrifying aura would be transmitted over. It made them tremble with fear. Thump, thump, thump. The 6 paths of reincarnation fist formed a 6 paths of reincarnation fist and crushed the Fortune Universe Palm. The terrifying power accompanied the fist and slammed into the Fortune Heaven Lord's body. Strange rays of light burst out from Heavenly Lord Fortune Creation's body in an attempt to disperse the power of this punch. But even so, the powerful counterforce still forced him to retreat again and again. Almost every step he took seemed to shatter heaven and earth. It was extremely strange and terrifying. This is not good. How can he be so strong? Even my Fortune Universe palm is no match for him. The Fortune Heaven Lord was trembling with fear. He had been invincible in this area since ancient times. He had never seen an existence that could be mentioned in the same breath as him. In the end, he only met one, and it was already so terrifying. Even though he considered himself to be the Fortune Heaven Lord, there was still a kind of fear that could not be dispersed. This also conflicted with his perception. The Fortune Heaven Lord was invincible. How could anyone be able to force him to this point? Fortune Heaven Lord, don't you call yourself the Fortune Heaven Lord? Why do you only have this little skill? Where is the rumored ability to reshape the world? Where did it go? Yishuin sneered and asked. Shut up. The Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch was enraged. He directly sent out a palm strike. It felt as though the universe was being split apart and the ancient desolation was being recreated. Even the timelines were being shattered. His palm strike contained too many things, enough to shatter the river of time. Yishuin was not afraid. He pinched a seal with his hand, and the Martial Emperor seal instantly condensed and slammed down on the palm. Bang! Yishuin's Martial Emperor seal instantly destroyed the Fortune Universe palm. Then, the Martial Emperor seal fell on the chest of the Fortune Heaven Lord, causing him to vomit blood and retreat. Chapter 3209. However, such an attack was only the beginning for Yishuin. Just when Yishuin was still feeling regretful, he suddenly thought of something, and that was to take away this piece of paper that recorded the universe creation palm. Originally, this was simply impossible because the people guarding the Creation Martial Pavilion would check it at any time to see if it was complete. However, this piece of paper was different. Apart from the words Universe Creation Palm, there was only an inscription on this piece of paper. There was nothing else. Yishuin couldn't help but feel shocked when he saw this inscription. This was a piece of paper that recorded the Universe Creation Palm. After countless years of development, it had developed its own civilization, its own world, and even the emperor who called himself the Fortune Heaven Monarch was born. His strength would greatly increase if he learned the Universe Creation Palm. With the Universe Creation Palm as his trump card, he would even dare to challenge the experts of the Ninth Realm. With his strength, he naturally wouldn't have anything to fear. In this era where the heavenly masters didn't appear, he could barely be considered as one of the strongest. Yishuin destroyed the Lord of Good Fortune. Then, the world started to disintegrate inch by inch and transformed into a piece of paper. The words Universe Creation Palm were engraved on this piece of paper. They were sparkling with golden light. Fast! A look of joy flashed in Yishuin's eyes. With this martial will, he could comprehend the Good Fortune Universe Palm. After all, this was the martial art technique cultivated by the Lord of Good Fortune. Yishuin's Martial Emperor seal covered everything. The shadow it cast was like a pair of wings. The reputation of the Universe Creation Palm was not in vain. However, it had collapsed after Yishuin's attack. Only the martial will left behind by the Fortune Heaven Monarch was left behind. Yishuin also noticed this. The Fortune Heaven Monarch seemed to have been imprisoned in this world. He couldn't get out. It was unknown how many foreign creatures he had killed with his palms. Not a single one of them had been a match for him. Even an Emperor-class creature was too weak in front of him. Countless pieces of information flew out of his eyes and poured into his mind. Although the Cosmic Creation Palm didn't specify how to cultivate it, the martial arts intent left behind by Heavenly Monarch Fate could be used as a reference. This was much simpler and more efficient than writing it down in words, even if it was written in Tao runes. Heavenly Monarch Fortune didn't even have the strength to fight back. At this time, the gap between an Imperial Emperor with a Tao artifact and an Imperial Emperor without a Tao artifact was completely revealed. Without a Tao artifact, Heavenly Monarch Fortune's every attack would cause him to suffer critical damage because he didn't have the means to defend himself. Just relying on his universe creation palm was impossible. After all, this was only a magical power. Therefore, the martial arts of the Fortune Heaven Monarch were limited to the universe creation palm. Because his body was also bound to this piece of paper, he couldn't leave this place and didn't have the materials to refine a Dao tool. Yi Shiwen even felt that this power had surpassed the power of a heavenly master. Heavenly Monarch Fortune immediately understood that he wasn't a match for the person in front of him. He wanted to escape, but he couldn't. The first thing he thought of was to escape, but it was useless. He was trapped here. Each palm was not the manifestation of a certain part of the great Tao. Instead, it was the integration of all the great Tao. It was a powerful palm technique that truly surpassed all living beings. Boom! The Fortune Heaven Monarch. At this time, the Fortune Heaven Monarch roared. At the same time, he took a step forward and rushed towards the Fortune Heaven Monarch again. The martial emperor seal rotated above his head and grew with the wind. In just a moment, it had grown to the size of an ancient sacred mountain. Then it smashed down on the spot. In front of other Eighth Realm sovereigns, the Fortune Heaven Monarch might have a chance to escape. However, in front of Yi Shiwen, there was no chance at all. Yi Shiwen wasn't afraid of anyone in the same realm. Yi Shiwen used his own great Tao to attack the Fortune Heaven Monarch. This set of palm techniques simply used the laws to attack, so its power was multiplied. Yi Shiwen slashed out thousands of times in a row. With each slash, the cracks in the world became bigger. Counting the time, thousands of years had passed. Apart from the first 800 years, which were spent on breaking through and consolidating the Eighth Realm, the remaining 200 years were mainly spent on comprehending the universe creation palm. At some point, Yi Shiwen's sword slashed down again, directly blasting towards the Fortune Heaven Monarch. Boom! The Fortune Heaven Monarch felt that he had been locked in place. The space had been sealed, and he couldn't escape. Because he was trapped in this world, there was no way for him to dodge on a large scale. In other words, the so-called Fortune Heaven Monarch was, in fact, just a magical power of the Fortune Heaven Monarch. However, because of the influence of the Fortune Heaven Monarch's thoughts, he didn't realize that he wasn't the Fortune Heaven Monarch. He still thought that he was the reincarnation of the Fortune Heaven Monarch. From a certain point of view, this view wasn't completely unreasonable. As he continued to comprehend, a message suddenly fell from the sky. It was the person guarding the Fortune Martial Pavilion outside, reminding Yi Shiwen that his time was up. Although he had never seen a celestial master, it wasn't like he didn't know anything about them. Given the level of a celestial master, it was impossible for him to know all the great Tao like the back of his hand. Gradually, little by little, the true face of this set of palm techniques emerged in front of him. With the help of the mysterious space, the mysteries of this set of palm techniques gradually manifested. It seemed to be menacing, but in fact, it couldn't withstand a single blow from Yi Shiwen. I want the Fortune Universe palm, but I don't want you to hand it over to me. Yi Shiwen sneered. Then he formed a big hand and directly grabbed the Fortune Heaven Monarch with the power of the Dark Bodhi Divine Hand. Then he suddenly squeezed, and the Fortune Heaven Monarch turned into a strand of divine thought. A huge strand of divine thought floated in the sky. Then a strong martial arts intent seeped out from it. The martial emperor seal directly smashed into the body of the Fortune Heaven Monarch like a thunderbolt. Boom! From this set of palm techniques, Yi Shiwen could see that the strength of the Fortune Heaven Monarch was even stronger than the legend said. At the very least, he couldn't achieve this level of strength. That terrifying collision directly annihilated all the civilizations born in the entire world. In an instant, it fell. This palm seemed to be driven by his own power, but in fact, this was not the case. Every palm directly used the power of the rules to kill the enemy. The martial arts intent in his hand was actually the martial arts intent of the Fortune Universe palm, left behind by the Fortune Heaven Monarch. It was originally left for later generations to cultivate and comprehend, but perhaps no one expected that this martial arts intent could produce its own will and then continuously cultivate until it reached the seventh realm. This was simply a miracle. Thinking of this, he began to analyze the Fortune Universe palm without any hesitation. As Yi Shiwen's spirit sank into it, it seemed as if a majestic and indomitable voice had appeared in front of his eyes. A palm had broken through the world and created a hole in the world. This wasn't a microcosm, but a fortune world. At that point, it was naturally more secure, and he didn't need to be on tenterhooks every day. This palm of his was the complete manifestation of all the power of the rules, and it was extremely terrifying. Although there were only a few words, each word was drawn with iron and silver hooks, and had the aura of a powerful army. Moreover, there was also a faint aura of the Great Way. Fast. The Fortune Heaven Monarch's vision and realm were far beyond the Emperor realm, and the martial arts he created naturally allowed the Emperor realm to exert power far beyond their own. This in itself was not surprising. It was simply incomparable to the other seventh realm, and it didn't even have its own real body. Fast. Soon, the originally tyrannical Fortune Heaven Monarch was on the verge of death. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something, and his eyes shone with a bright light. Stop! Don't you want this Fortune Universe palm? I can get it to you. Bang! Yi Shiwen opened his eyes and said to himself, How long has it been? And I'm already here. No wonder the fake Fortune Heaven Monarch strength had increased so much. The martial arts left behind by the Fortune Heaven Monarch was naturally extraordinary, and it was above the realm of Heavenly Master. The Martial Emperor Seal was added to the Martial Emperor Seal and its power sword. The Fortune Heaven Monarch didn't have a Dao tool to protect himself, and was directly hit by Yi Shiwen without the slightest buffer. How could he withstand it? He vomited blood on the spot. Boom! The Fortune Heaven Monarch was like a huge celestial body that smashed into the earth of the world, and it almost tore the whole world apart. Volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, and everything else symbolized the end of the world. However, 200 years had passed in the blink of an eye. In these 200 years, he had only comprehended a small part of it, and it could be said to be superficial. The Fortune Universe palm was too profound, and although he had the help of the mysterious space, he didn't have enough resources. He had exhausted all of his resources, and this had undoubtedly caused his comprehension ability to decline by several levels. Yi Shiwen shouted, Fortune Heaven Monarch, ha! How ridiculous! The Fortune Heaven Monarch was hit by Yi Shiwen's attack, and it was obvious that he was at a disadvantage in front of Yi Shiwen. Although he could contend with Yi Shiwen for a short time after activating the Fortune Universe palm, he was still in the seventh realm, and the gap between each realm of the Emperor realm was very big. This world seemed very big, but it was far from enough for a seventh realm and an eighth realm Emperor realm. Chapter 32:10. Obviously, this piece of paper should be out of the line of sight of the martial arts pavilion's guards. Otherwise, how could the book's spirit grow to the Emperor level? This should not be allowed, and not an ordinary Emperor level, but a seventh realm Emperor level. Obviously, the universe creation palm's intent had been in existence for a long time, but it had not been discovered. Perhaps even the guards of the martial arts pavilion did not know of the existence of this piece of paper. Even if they knew, they would not be able to detect it. This piece of paper contained the treasures left behind by the Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch. If he wanted to hide, it was normal that they couldn't find him. Up until now, no one had been able to match the strength of the Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch. Thinking of this, Yi Shiwen immediately kept this piece of paper into his body and brought it out to study slowly. Because it was time, Yi Shiwen did not hesitate and flew directly to the exit. Yi Shiwen clearly felt a divine sense sweep over him as he flew towards the exit. It seemed as if this divine sense was checking whether he was going to take away the books. Each book here was written by an emperor. Any one of these books would set off a reign of terror if they were to be placed outside. Countless killings would ensue, so no one could take them away. Although this was not the full extent of the Fortune God dynasty's heritage and strength, it was at least a very important factor. Naturally, it could not be careless. Moreover, there was more than one Emperor Lord stationed here. Even if he wanted to play tricks, it was impossible. Moreover, Yi Shiwen also felt that there was a formation left by a celestial master. Unless a celestial master used a technique, there was no way to hide. Therefore, Yi Shiwen was somewhat nervous. Fortunately, everything turned out as he had guessed. Even the Heavenly Venerable's barrier array couldn't detect the good fortune universe palm. After all, they couldn't detect the aura of the good fortune heavenly monarch. After leaving the martial arts pavilion, Yi Shiwen felt that someone was watching him. This was because the method of monitoring was very rough, or rather, it did not matter if Yi Shiwen discovered it. Yi Shiwen quickly sensed that it was not someone else, but Emperor Tianyi. Are you sure you could defeat me? Yi Shiwen sneered. He completely restrained his aura, and it was no different from before he broke through. Presumably, Emperor Tianyi wouldn't know. Emperor Tianyi had the guts to spy on Yi Shiwen blatantly, but he didn't dare to make a move in the Fortune Divine Capital. Previously, it was just a Tao body. It was completely different from personally making a move with his real body. Even so, he didn't think of making a move with Yi Shiwen before he was destroyed by Yi Shiwen. At most, he just wanted to teach him a lesson. It was just that he did not expect Yi Shiwen to be even more unyielding than he had imagined, and even more vicious and merciless. He had destroyed them just like that. In the Martial Creation Pavilion, many people had witnessed this dispute. Even if he wanted to look for trouble, he could not find any excuse or reason. After all, he was the one who started the fight. There might be people who dared to be presumptuous here of Emperor. Yi Shiwen didn't need to worry about his safety here. Even if he was being monitored, it didn't matter. However, once he went out, he might face the attack of Emperor Tianyi. Although both of them were from the Fortune God dynasty, Yi Shiwen never believed that his importance could be compared to Emperor Tianyi of the Ninth Realm in terms of the importance of both sides. In the end, Emperor Tianyi might have to pay a considerable price to settle this matter. However, taking over the land of 4 states from Yi Shiwen's hands might not be a loss in the end. Although it was cruel, Yi Shiwen had already calculated everything clearly. So, it didn't matter to him. He had pledged his allegiance to the Fortune God dynasty because he wanted to take advantage of the Fortune God dynasty's power and resources. On the other hand, it was normal for the Fortune God dynasty to do whatever they wanted. Emperor Tianyi's calculations were very clear. Even if Yi Shiwen advanced a step further and stepped into the 8th realm, Yi Shiwen would not be his opponent. However, Emperor Tianyi probably did not expect that Yi Shiwen actually had the universe creation palm in his hands. It was useless for others to obtain it in a short period of time. After all, the martial arts of the good fortune Heavenly Lord couldn't be thoroughly studied in a short period of time. However, Yi Shiwen was different. He had the mysterious space. It was a pity that the dragon vein resources on his body had already been exhausted. Otherwise, he would have been able to cultivate the good fortune universe palm to a certain extent in 200 years. Then, he would have been able to display a considerable effect. However, he was not in a hurry because he still had a considerable number of Emperor's corpses. In this world, this was a hard currency that was even harder than the dragon vein. Moreover, he also knew of a force that could completely swallow these Emperor's corpses. The Sky Commerce Alliance. The headquarters of this behemoth was also in the Fortune Divine Capital. It was different from ordinary sections. Ordinary sects were committed to independent development, and it was best if they could break away from the control of the Fortune God dynasty. However, the purpose of the Sky Commerce Alliance was to earn more wealth. If it did not rely on the Fortune God dynasty, how could it develop to such a behemoth level today? On the contrary, for them, chaos in the world was not a good thing. Only when the world was at peace could their alliance expand rapidly and earn more resources. And only when the emperor had more resources could they make rapid breakthroughs. Therefore, there was no fundamental conflict of interest between them and the Fortune God dynasty. Naturally, they were completely different from other large sections. Yi Shiwen didn't conceal himself and flew straight into the Sky Business Alliance's headquarters. Compared to the Sky Business Alliance's headquarters in Stormwind City, The Sky Business Alliance's Fortune Divine Capital's headquarters was even more magnificent. It was extremely luxurious and didn't look like a place for cultivators. In fact, it looked a bit like a worldly merchant. Lord Marshal Emperor, please forgive me for not going out to meet you. As soon as Yi Shiwen entered the Sky Commerce Alliance, a steward in the lobby immediately came forward and greeted him. Although he was also a peak quasi-emperor, he was also very clear about the gap between him and the person in front of him. If the person in front of him wanted to kill him, it would only take a word from him. Even if he really did that, the probability of the Sky Commerce Alliance haggling over him was not very high. After all, everyone was very clear about the difference between a quasi-emperor and a Seventh Realm Emperor. Just like how the Fortune God dynasty would choose Emperor Tian Yi between Yi Shiwen and Emperor Tian Yi, everyone had a price. Oh, you know me? Yi Shiwen was also a little interested. After all, the other party had recognized him at first sight, and he was just a steward. That's natural. For a distinguished guest like Lord Marshal Emperor, every one of us must remember, the steward quickly said. In fact, for the stewards of the Sky Commerce Alliance, recognizing many important people at first sight was just a basic skill. Yi Shiwen's portrait had already been spread all over the world by him. Anyone who was willing to learn about it would be able to learn about it. Not only was Yi Shiwen's strength outstanding, but his extraordinary strength above the Seventh Realm was enough to be listed as one of the most dangerous experts in the Sky Commerce Alliance. Not to mention, Yi Shiwen's previous cooperation with them had also benefited the Sky Commerce Alliance a lot. Now, Yi Shiwen had another identity, the Four Prefectures Inspector. In other words, the Human Province, the Land of Thunder Lake, the Dark Province, and the Stone Province were all under Yi Shiwen's control. In this way, whether it was Yi Shiwen's identity, status, strength, or the good foundation of cooperation in the past, he had become a distinguished guest in the eyes of the Sky Commerce Alliance. How could such a person not be recognized at first sight? Yi Shiwen immediately smiled and did not intend to continue to investigate. Instead, he said directly, "Do you have anyone who can be in charge here? I have a big deal with the Sky Commerce Alliance." "Yes, please follow me to the VIP room first, Lord Marshal Emperor. Our leader will be here soon," the steward said immediately. Yi Shiwen nodded and followed the steward all the way to an elegantly decorated VIP room. Just by looking at this VIP room, it was completely different from the magnificent decoration outside. The air was filled with the smell of a kind of precious spices, which was extremely beneficial for practitioners. If ordinary practitioners could have the help of this precious spices, it would not be difficult for them to have a clear mind and not have any inner demons. To some extent, it was a bit similar to Yi Shiwen's Enlightening Mind Ancient Tree. However, compared to the Enlightening Mind Ancient Tree, these spices were only one-time consumables. Moreover, they were very precious and expensive. It was impossible for ordinary practitioners to use them for a long time. At most, they would use them when making a breakthrough. Yi Shiwen's cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, just like sitting on a rocket. Naturally, the role of the Enlightening Mind Ancient Tree could not be underestimated. Yi Shiwen didn't have to wait for a long time as a figure pushed open the door and entered. He saw that it was a young man who seemed to be in his 20s. He was clad in a light blue robe, and his clothes were gorgeous. He looked like an ordinary young master of a rich family. However, his eyes were like gems and were twinkling with the radiance of wisdom. An ordinary person would be able to see that this person was extraordinary with just a glance. As soon as the young man came up, he said, "I'm Emperor God of Silver Frost. Greetings, Marshal Emperor." After saying that, the young man bowed slightly. "Greetings, Emperor God of Silver Frost." Yi Shiwen also bowed slightly. He tried to feel the young man's cultivation, but it was a little vague. He could not completely feel it, or it could be said that there was no way to completely calculate it. With his current cultivation, he could only see through ordinary people in the Eighth Realm at a glance. So, there was only one possibility. If he guessed correctly, this Emperor God of Silver Frost should be in existence in the Ninth Realm. The supermasters in the Ninth Realm were only as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns in the Sky Business Alliance. Unexpectedly, they had sent out such a level of existence. It seemed that the Sky Business Alliance really attached great importance to the deal with him. I didn't expect a Taoism friend in the Ninth Realm to come. I'm really honored, Yi Shiwen said with a slight smile. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.